A genius scientist accidentally logs out of his life and is reborn in the Joseon era, traveling hundreds of years across time and space. Fortunately, he is reincarnated as the Crown Prince of the Joseon dynasty, one of the most famous kingdoms in Korean history. There, he disrupts the established order by using future knowledge to reform his country. While other nations rely on oil lamps, his country uses electric lights. While others use horse-drawn carriages for transportation, his country has trains. While others go to war with swords and arrows, his nation dominates the battlefield with machine guns. This is the premise of Black Corporation, Joseon. The story begins by showing the past of Jinho, our protagonist. From a young age, he demonstrated extraordinary intelligence. At just 5 years old, he could solve a Rubik's Cube, leaving his teachers and parents in awe. Their expectations soared when his IQ test revealed that he was a genius. However, their joy was short-lived because Jinho's brilliance was not in academics. Had he been born in an earlier era, he would have been a legendary inventor, etching his name in history with golden ink. Reality, however, was different. When it came to academics, Jinho's abilities were far below average, frustrating his parents to no end. They couldn't understand why their son, gifted with such a high IQ, refused to use it for studying. Kim Jinho, our protagonist, was a genius inventor. He could create anything with his hands. In high school, he built a model steam engine. In college, he designed a human-powered aircraft that required no fuel. But one day, an earthquake struck, causing him to drop an explosive substance, and just like that, he got his ticket to reincarnation. Jinho woke up in the body of a newborn baby. He quickly realized that his new family was far from ordinary. They were part of the elite. At first, he thought his parents were just wealthy nobles. But they were not only rich, they were powerful. His father was the Crown Prince, the fourth ruler of the Joseon dynasty in Korean history. Our protagonist was born with a golden spoon in his mouth. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, Jinho turned 4 years old. The current king decided to abdicate the throne to the Crown Prince. As a result, Jinho's father became the new king, and Jinho automatically became the Crown Prince. Like all royal children, he was required to start his education at an early age, but mentally, he was already over 30 years old. He found it infuriating to sit through basic lessons like a child. To escape studying, Jinho devised a plan to use his father to his advantage. In history, King Sejong the Great was known as a wise ruler. He valued knowledge and actively nurtured the talents of his people. Jinho's plan was to gather skilled craftsmen, teach them important future knowledge, and earn his father's trust and respect. He dreamed of living a luxurious life, reaping the rewards without working. However, first, he needed to appear diligent and studious to gain people's trust and manipulate them easily. The first step of his plan was to win over his teachers, as they would hold important positions in court once he reached adulthood. More importantly, he needed to train these individuals to become his loyal subordinates in the future. The next day, while on his way to his study, Jinho suddenly caught a foul stench. He looked around, wondering what was causing such a horrible smell. Then, right in front of him, he spotted a large pile of dung on the grass. He thought, seriously? Did people in ancient times relieve themselves anywhere they wanted? At that moment, a group of court maids passed by, bowing in respect to the Crown Prince. Jinho was about to continue his walk, but the foul smell hit his nose again. He turned and noticed that the last maid in the group had accidentally stepped on the dung, staining her gown. Jinho was furious. He realized that the culprit behind this mess was a palace maid. As someone from the modern world, he could not tolerate such unhygienic behavior. Determined to prevent this from happening again, Jinho decided to take action. Later, Jinho spoke with his teacher. On my way here today, I saw a maid with dung on her gown. It's natural for people to relieve themselves, but if it gets on their clothes, that's unacceptable. One of the teachers argued that clothing was not only meant to cover the body, but also represented social status. Therefore, some inconveniences should be tolerated. With his modern mindset, Jinho immediately interrupted the teacher. Even if someone wears tattered clothes, their virtue will still shine in this world. Don't you see that judging a person's status based on their attire is outdated? The teachers fell silent, realizing they could not argue with him. They quickly changed the subject. One of them said, "This is not something that can be solved overnight, Your Highness. Do you have any other questions?" Jinho cursed them in his mind, annoyed by their evasiveness. He continued his discussion. Recently, I read a report about the invasion of Tsushima Island. It was said that everyone, from nobles to commoners, had to enlist because the defense forces were severely lacking. Why don't we train a naval fleet? Jinho fired a barrage of questions, leaving the teachers stuttering. It seemed they were completely at a loss. I also want to know, why didn't we evacuate the civilians from the island? If you're worried about Japanese pirates occupying the land, wouldn't it be better to relocate the people to the north? The more Jinho spoke, the more the teachers began to sweat. They never expected the Crown Prince to be so knowledgeable about national affairs. But no matter how much Jinho pressed them, the old foxes insisted that this was beyond their control. Hearing this only made Jinho angrier, but there was nothing he could do. After that incident, the old scholars began gathering to talk in secret. They were amazed at how intelligent the Crown Prince was. Even though he was only 5 years old, he was already smarter than his own teachers. They discussed among themselves, saying that if the Crown Prince was already this brilliant, they should start teaching him more advanced topics. Once he ascended the throne, he would surely become a wise and remarkable emperor. Meanwhile, Jinho in the palace had no idea that he had just made his own life more difficult. In reality, Jinho hated studying, and now they were going to make him study even more. Jinho was still upset with the old scholars for their arrogance. According to history, the original owner of this body would die young due to overwork. Jinho had planned to start taking action when he turned 10, but given the current situation, he realized he needed to act sooner. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye, and now Jinho was 7 years old. He was officially crowned as the Crown Prince in front of the entire court. The ancient rituals were too complicated and tedious, making him feel utterly exhausted. However, after years of grueling studies, he had finally secured his rightful position as Crown Prince. Now, he was allowed to participate in court sessions alongside his father and the ministers. There, he could propose some plans to develop the country, strengthen its wealth, and solidify its power. However, the biggest problem was that the kingdom didn't have enough funds to operate. Even though he had been crowned Crown Prince, he was still just a 7-year-old child with no real power. No one would listen to him. He couldn't just sit still. He needed to start small. Jinho wrote on a piece of paper, only to smudge ink all over it. "So annoying," he muttered. No matter how many times he used the brush, he just couldn't get used to it. This era. Suddenly an idea popped into his mind. Ah, that's it. Instead of tackling major reforms, I should start with this small inconvenience. Outside, the blacksmith workshop was busy forging hot iron, shaping it into various weapons. This was the military supply division, the imperial facility responsible for weapon production. As Jinho passed by, the sight excited him just from the smell of hot metal. I miss the smell of metal. He planned to come here more often to get to know the people. A supervising officer approached him, bowing deeply to greet the Crown Prince. Jinho smiled and responded, "It's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for your hard work. Thanks to your efforts, Joseon's defenses grow stronger every day." The man's name was Lee Chang-ho, the overseer of the military supply division. Humbled by the prince's praise, he replied, "It is an honor, Your Highness." Jinho cleared his throat and got straight to the point. "I'm here looking for someone. Who is the best craftsman here when it comes to handling metal and gold?" Lee Chang-ho pondered for a moment before replying, "There is someone who might be able to help." Lee Chang-ho quickly summoned the blacksmith in question. As soon as the man saw the Crown Prince, he knelt and bowed deeply, saying, "This humble servant greets Your Highness, the Crown Prince." Jinho humbly replied, "Oh, don't say that. How can someone working in the military supply division, responsible for strengthening Joseon's defense, be considered lowly?" The blacksmith quickly responded, "Your Highness is right. Your kindness knows no bounds." Then Jinho took out a scroll and said, "Come closer. I have something I want to ask you." He placed the blueprint on the table and asked, "Can you make this?" The blacksmith examined the sketch with a puzzled expression and asked, "What is this?" Jinho placed the scroll down and explained that it was a replacement for the brush. The blacksmith's face showed clear astonishment. It looked like something that could hold ink inside and release it while writing, but the most crucial part seemed to be controlling the amount of ink that flowed out with each press. Jinho was delighted to see that the blacksmith had grasped his idea perfectly. Additionally, there needs to be a small round bead at the tip to prevent too much ink from soaking into the paper. More importantly, can you make the slit where the ink flows out as narrow as possible? The blacksmith replied honestly, "If I do my best, I think I can make it around 5 mo-yu." Jinho started calculating in his head. 5 mo-yu was about 3 centimeters, so 1/10 of that would be roughly 0.125 centimeters. Jinho was surprised that the blacksmith could estimate it so accurately. However, we need to produce many of these pens, and they must be finished as soon as possible, not within a month. Since the tip of the pen will be in contact with liquid, we should use gold and silver to prevent rusting. These will be made by hammering thin plates, so if we create the mold properly, we can produce about 20 pieces per day. The blacksmith pointed at the drawing and said, "The main issue is this slit." Jinho continued discussing the details with the blacksmith. When writing, the slit needed to be as thin as a strand of hair. Jinho muttered to himself, "About the size of a mechanical pencil tip. Maybe 0.5 millimeters should be enough." After some calculations, the blacksmith decided on a specific size. Jinho asked seriously, "How long will it take to complete?" The blacksmith replied, "If you give me 2 days, I'll give you 3 days, and bring me your best final product." The blacksmith gladly accepted the Crown Prince's request. 3 days later, the blacksmith presented the finished product. He had made 5 different pen tips, each with a slightly different slit thickness. The blacksmith said, "Please try them and choose the one you prefer." Jinho attached the pen tip to the pen body and nodded. Carefully, he dipped the tip into the ink tray and made a quick stroke on the paper. The pen tip produced an elegant, smooth line, exceeding his expectations. Jinho smiled in satisfaction while the 2 craftsmen stood in awe. "I love it. You did an outstanding job," Jinho praised. "It was all thanks to your guidance, Your Highness," the blacksmith humbly replied. After testing all the pen nibs provided, Jinho chose one and ordered 100 more in the selected size. He also added a special request for 10 pens to be engraved with a plum blossom design on their golden bodies. Without hesitation, the blacksmith agreed to Jinho's request. After concluding their discussion, Jinho quickly left the workshop. Li Chang-ho remarked, "His Highness is truly mature for his age." Gong nodded in agreement and said, "I heard he just turned 8 this year, but the way he speaks and acts is more like a 30-year-old Li Chang-ho." Li Chang-ho turned to him and said, "Look at yourself. You've received something truly great." In Gong's hands was a piece of paper with the words, "The greatest craftsman of Joseon," written on it, stamped with the handprint of Crown Prince Yi Hyang. This revealed that Jinho's name in this life was Yi Hyang. Gong deeply treasured the gift. He even planned to find the best carpenter to craft a frame for the certificate given by Crown Prince Hyang, intending to keep it as a family heirloom. Finally, the pen nibs requested by Crown Prince Yi Hyang were completed, with intricate plum blossom engravings decorating them. The pen glided gracefully across the paper, producing beautifully smooth lines. When King Sejong tried it, he was utterly amazed by the pen created by Crown Prince Yi Hyang. In the 3rd year of King Sejong's reign, the Crown Prince presented the golden pen to him. After testing it, King Sejong couldn't stop praising it. Writing with this pen made his wrist and arm feel incredibly comfortable. Even when writing quickly, the strokes remained elegant. King Sejong said, "The Crown Prince has created something truly remarkable." With humility, the Crown Prince responded that he was unsure how to react, as he felt unworthy of such praise from King Sejong. King Sejong then ordered the royal historians to record what the Crown Prince had accomplished that day. The historians bowed and acknowledged the command. King Sejong repeatedly admired the pen, then noticed something special. "Is this a plum blossom?" The Crown Prince quickly answered, "Yes, it is a plum blossom engraved on the pen nib, as it is the symbol of the royal family." The more the Crown Prince explained, the prouder King Sejong became. This is truly impressive, but how did the Crown Prince come up with this idea? As expected, the king was curious about the inspiration behind the Crown Prince's creation. The Crown Prince paused for a moment, thinking to himself. "One day, as my father dipped his brush into the ink, I noticed something unusual." The king raised an eyebrow. "Unusual?" the Crown Prince continued. "I saw the ink being absorbed by the brush bristles. Normally, water flows downward, but what I saw was the opposite. How could I not find that fascinating?" He then added, "That's when I started working on this pen." The king was impressed by the Crown Prince's intelligence. "Many people have used brushes, but none have thought like you. Isn't this a perfect example of learning through observation?" said King Sejong. "Thank you for your kind words, father. I have a request," the Crown Prince said. "Go ahead," replied King Sejong. "Eunuch, bring it here," the Crown Prince ordered. The eunuch stepped forward, carrying a mysterious box. Crown Prince Yi Hyang turned to his father and said, "Please distribute these golden pens to the historians and court ministers." The king, intrigued, asked, "All of these pens?" The Crown Prince proposed that ministers and officials who needed to write quickly should use them, and that historians who tirelessly recorded everything could benefit from these pens. Everyone's eyes widened in surprise. No one had ever thought about empathizing with the historian's work before. The king then asked for opinions. "I believe the Crown Prince's idea is excellent. What do you all think?" Do the ministers agree with his suggestion? One minister responded, "We believe the Crown Prince is right. For someone so young, he already thinks about the well-being of his officials. It's truly admirable." Finally, the king granted permission to distribute the golden pens to the historians and court officials. Throughout the session, King Sejong smiled with pride, and the ministers shared in his joy. "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince has a deep and thoughtful mind," they said. The Crown Prince smiled in satisfaction. Not long after, the golden pen he created sparked a new trend in Joseon. In the 3rd year of King Sejong's reign, the Crown Prince introduced the pen to the court, and the reaction was overwhelming. Officials and ministers fell in love with the invention, and soon everyone was talking about it. "Have you tried the golden pen created by the Crown Prince?" "I have. It's truly remarkable." One reason for its immense popularity was that it made writing official documents much easier. In addition, Hyang designed a portable writing pad for generals, allowing them to write comfortably anywhere when issuing urgent commands. It became the perfect companion for the golden-tipped pen. King Sejong was delighted. He ordered the mass production of both items and distributed them to the generals alongside Hyang's golden pens. As a result, these innovations brought significant changes to the kingdom. In the capital, merchants were busy with their booming business. "How much for this pen?" a customer asked. 7 kilograms of rice. But for you, I'll lower it to 6.5, the merchant replied. The customer tried the golden pen before buying it and was amazed by its beauty and ease of use compared to a traditional brush. "So, this is the golden tip pen everyone's talking about?" The shopkeeper responded, "Indeed! It's the pen endorsed by the king himself, with an exquisite plum blossom engraving." The man was impressed. The pen was truly elegant. Smiling, he added, "It's also easy to carry around and very practical when I need to jot something down quickly." Gathering his newly purchased papers, he waved goodbye and walked away. The shopkeeper bowed, reminding him to be careful. As the customer disappeared from view, the shopkeeper couldn't shake the thought of golden-tipped pens, sensing the scent of profit in the air. A few days later, during a court session, a minister reported to the king, "Recently there has been an unpleasant incident in the market." "An unpleasant incident? Tell me," King Sejong commanded. There are rumors that counterfeit golden pens are being sold everywhere, the minister explained. How dare they forge such a valuable item, especially one bearing the royal emblem? This is a serious crime and must be dealt with accordingly. The officials all agreed, urging the king to impose severe punishment. However, the king believed that the crown prince's opinion was crucial, given that he was the pen's creator. He immediately ordered an eunuch to summon the crown prince. Moments later, Hyang arrived. "Father, you called for me?" The king got straight to the point. "The ministers have suggested that those who attempt to profit from counterfeit golden pens should be severely punished. I want to hear your thoughts, my son." Hyang furrowed his brows, deep in thought. All eyes were on him, waiting for the young prince's response, admiring his wisdom. After a few moments, Hyang spoke. "Father, may I handle this matter?" A month passed, and the crown prince began taking action. He arrived at the Ministry of Revenue, where everyone present immediately knelt, bowing deeply in respect. Hyang spoke calmly. "Well then, do you know why I've summoned you here?" He lifted a pen. One of the officials saw it and turned pale. No one dared to raise their heads. A representative from the Merchants Guild spoke hesitantly. "None of us would dare to commit such a disgraceful act. Our guild would never betray the kingdom like that," another representative added, trembling. Hyang glanced at them and said, "I didn't come here to accuse you. Stand up." Sweat dripped from their faces, their bodies trembling so violently that they couldn't bring themselves to rise. Hyang's voice turned sharp and commanding. "Don't make me repeat myself. What are you doing? Stand up now." As the guild representatives regained their composure, Hyang took a seat and spoke with authority. "I'll get straight to the point. I intend to grant production rights for golden-tipped pens and regular pens to one of your guilds. However, those producing golden-tipped pens would be taxed 20% of their profits, and the market price of the pens could not exceed 60% of the production cost." A hesitant official finally spoke up. "Your Highness, I apologize for saying this, but..." He carefully explained that a 60% profit margin sounded excessive. "But if you factor in the wages of sellers and craftsmen, we only make about 30% profit. If the court takes 20% of that, we'll be left with only 10%. Hyang slammed his hand on the table, his face filled with fury. "Are you trying to deceive me?" The official instantly fell silent. Hyang pointed directly at him and shouted, "I specifically said 20% of the profits. Isn't 20% of 30% only about 6%? You fool, blinded by greed and deceit. Get out of my sight and revoke his guild's trading rights." The man's face turned to sheer horror. Stammering, he tried to protest. "Your Highness!" But two guards immediately dragged him away, ignoring his desperate pleas. "Please, Your Highness, I beg you!" Another official glanced at him in terror, and an oppressive silence filled the room. No one dared to speak. Hyang then addressed the room once more. "Very well. His Majesty the King and I believe that merchants and commoners are invaluable to Joseon. No one can accomplish everything alone. Everyone needs help in life." Suddenly, Hyang's voice rose sharply. "But if any of you dare to lie to me as he did, merchants will be regarded as nothing more than scum. Mark my words." Everyone bowed deeply and responded in unison. "We will remember your words well, Your Highness." With that, the discussion regarding the golden pen production was settled without further opposition. After the meeting, Hyang called for Eunuch Zhou to speak with him privately. A slight smirk formed at the corner of his lips. "You handled things very well, Eunuch Zhou," Hyang remarked. "I wouldn't dare, Your Highness, but may I ask, why did you do this?" the eunuch inquired. Hyang let out a quiet sigh. "You know I'm still too young. I had no other choice." Eunuch Zhou nodded in understanding. "That is true. Very well, Your Highness. With your permission, I shall take my leave and rest." As Hyang watched him go, he felt deeply satisfied. Everything had gone exactly as planned. A government official suddenly spoke up. "Your Majesty, I, General Sung have something to say." His voice was firm as he continued. "We cannot proceed with the Crown Prince's plan." With unwavering confidence, he addressed the king directly. This was the first time Hyang had faced such political intrigue since his reincarnation. Until now, he had always been met with endless praise and admiration, especially after the success of the Golden Pen, which had gradually filled the government's treasury. The national budget had never been as large as it was now, and the financial situation was steadily improving. King Sejong and his ministers had begun to recognize the positive impact of commerce. The king himself praised Hyang, saying, "The Crown Prince has truly accomplished something remarkable." However, those who disapproved of him had started gathering in secret. A group of conspirators met in hushed discussions, expressing their concerns that the court was becoming too accommodating to merchants, potentially lowering its status to that of common traders. They believed the king and his ministers were being overly generous. One minister stroked his beard and said, "The root of all this is the Crown Prince. We must act quickly and bring this to the king's attention before things spiral out of control." The group agreed. No matter how intelligent the Crown Prince was, he was still just a child. Allowing a child to make such important decisions was a grave mistake. However, before they could act, the great retired King Taejong passed away on May 10th, in the 4th year of King Sejong's reign. He died at the age of 56. With his passing, the conspirators had no choice but to postpone their plans. It seems we must wait for another opportunity, one of them remarked, and the others nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Hyang was consumed with work day and night. He buried himself in books imported from China, standing with his hands on his hips and an expression of confidence. He hoped they would help him overcome his challenges and serve as inspiration for his ideas. By using these books as references, no one would question where his ideas originated, but even as he strategized, a dark expression crossed his face. "I need to learn how to lie," he muttered, "so everything goes according to plan." During a formal presentation at the court, Hyang clearly and logically laid out his proposal. "That is why I believe it would be much easier if these Hindu numerals, which the Westerners refer to as Arabic numerals, were used in our country." "What do the ministers think of the Crown Prince's proposal?" King Sejong asked. Minister of Taxation Kim Jong stepped forward. "After careful consideration, I believe Hindu numerals are indeed highly effective for representing numbers." Minister of Personnel Heo Jo nodded in agreement. "I concur with that assessment," he added. The king swiftly made his decision. With the approval of these two key ministries, all officials are permitted to use Hindu numerals starting next month. If the results prove favorable, we will implement them nationwide. "We obey your majesty's command," the ministers responded in unison. As the next petition was read, King Sejong looked toward Hyang. "I believe the crown prince should hear this," he said. Hyang looked puzzled. "Yes, father?" The king rubbed his temples, concern evident on his face. "The Ming Empire has sent a letter. Emperor Yongle was very pleased with the golden pens we previously sent, and has now ordered us to send an additional 100,000 as tribute." Hyang knew that the royal treasury was not in good condition, and he quickly began thinking. Suddenly, an idea struck him. He turned to King Sejong and proposed, "What if the government ran a business itself?" "Run a business?" The court was stunned by the suggestion. "How could that possibly work?" the inspector general protested, but the king motioned for them to be calm and allowed the crown prince to explain. Hyang carefully laid out his reasoning. "Since the Ming emperor is requesting more pens, it's clear they are quite popular in the Ming dynasty. Given their vast territory and large population, the number of literate people in Ming is certainly much higher than in our own country. If we collaborate with the merchants' guilds to handle the production of golden-tipped pens, the number of pens we can sell will far exceed the amount required for tribute." The king and his ministers fell into deep thought, carefully weighing the proposal. Minister Kim Jong silently calculated the numbers in his head. "If we go by these projections, we are certain to make a profit," Hyang continued. "We could also have merchants accompany the Ming Empire's diplomatic envoys. In return, the merchants would only need to cover their lodging expenses." The king and several ministers exchanged understanding glances and smiled. However, Minister Sung Woo growled in protest. "No, we cannot follow the crown prince's plan." He elaborated on his concerns. The crown prince's proposal would undoubtedly bring wealth to the palace. But, as history has shown, when we accumulate great riches, people become consumed by luxury. This leads to tyranny, making it impossible to uphold the true path of a king. Suddenly, another voice cut in. "I, the Minister of Rights, agree with the Inspector General." Minister Sung added, "How can we allow lowly merchants to accompany a diplomatic mission to the emperor? It would disgrace the honor of the Joseon nation." He went on, "It seems the crown prince does not yet fully understand matters of state and diplomacy. I believe it would be best for him to focus on his studies and learn to view the nation's affairs through the eyes of a true king." With respect, Hyang turned to his father. "May I respond, father?" The king gave a nod, granting permission. Hyang then looked straight at Sung "Are you saying that if we become wealthy, people will fall into decadence, ultimately leading to tyranny, and that this is inevitable, based on past events?" Sung began to answer, but before he could finish, Hyang interrupted. "If we look at history, people have had to sweat and bleed to maintain their luxuries." "Are you accusing me of exploiting the people's sweat and blood?" Sung shot back. "Haven't I already said that we are bringing in wealth from outside our borders?" But Hyang was undeterred. Even if the results have been favorable so far, there is no guarantee that will always be the case. And when things turn bad, it's the people who will suffer the most. Standing his ground, he then asked, "Are you only living for today, General Sung Sung furrowed his brows. "What are you implying?" Hyang didn't hesitate. "How can you be so sure that the golden pen is just a one-time success? Merchants don't only sell golden pens, after all." Sung frowned. "Do any high-ranking officials even use these pens?" "At first, many may have bought them out of curiosity," Sung continued. "But in the end, they can never compare to the elegance of a traditional brush. They will remain nothing more than trivial playthings." Minister of Taxation Kim Jeom interjected. "General, you are mistaken. Do you know how many golden pens were sold in just 1 month? 400 within the government, and over 1,000 in total." Sung was stunned. "In a single month? How could something so insignificant sell in such numbers?" Hyang smiled faintly. "I apologize. Perhaps it seems trivial because it was created by a mere child." Realizing his mistake, Sung quickly bowed. "Forgive me, Your Highness, for my rudeness." Hyang raised his voice. "That is why, for the prosperity of our people, our relationship with merchants is crucial." Hyang then called for a eunuch. "Bring me the book from my study titled Geography of the World." Moments later, the book was placed in King Sejong's hands. This is one of the books I collected thanks to the envoys we sent to the Ming dynasty. It details the geography and regional products of Ming and its neighboring countries. It also records that both the Ming dynasty and the Viet dynasty harvest more wheat than our Joseon kingdom. They have abundant food reserves. Piang continued. Many of our impoverished people suffer from hunger because our harvests are scarce due to droughts and spring famines. That is why we must use the profits from these envoys to buy wheat and provide relief for our people. Once again, Sungum voiced his strong objection. The true path of a king lies in honest poverty. Both the ruler and his people should find contentment in living humbly, take joy in acting with integrity, and build virtue. Hyang raised his voice. Are you saying we should be proud of poverty and find happiness in honest suffering? Do you truly believe the people wish to live in righteous destitution? The people are simply poor. They die of thirst in the summer, freeze to death in the winter, and starve in the spring. In such a dire situation, who would praise their ruler for his virtue? Hyang spoke with unwavering conviction. There is a saying, even a nobleman would climb walls if his child starves for 3 days. No parent can sit idly while their children go hungry. A king is the father of his people. His children are crying out in hunger. Shouldn't a father do something for them? Upon hearing these words, King Sejong involuntarily exclaimed with enthusiasm, My son, that was an excellent speech. The scribes looked around in confusion before hurriedly writing down his words. King Sejong cleared his throat, and the court officials who had opposed the crown prince's ideas fell into silence, their gazes fixed on the king. He took a moment to regain his composure. As Hyang observed him, the silence lingered, with everyone waiting in quiet anticipation. Then, the king finally spoke. Crown Prince, please continue, he commanded. Yes, father, Hyang replied. The ministers and nobles outside the palace can endure hunger because they understand why they must do so and how to withstand it. But the common people lack that knowledge. They do not know how to endure hunger. If we truly wish to teach them, we must first alleviate their suffering, at least a little. That is true, King Sejong declared, slamming his hand onto the table with a loud thud. The entire court watched in stunned silence. Inwardly, Hyang thought, My father is so fired up that he might explode. Let's wrap this session up quickly, he continued. Throughout history, the will of the people has always been the will of heaven. Even if we uphold virtue, what would the gods think of us if our people are still crying out in misery? Moreover, there is a saying, man proposes, but God disposes. After doing everything in our power, shouldn't it be up to the heavens to decide? Let's wait and see how the heavens respond. Yet, when droughts or plagues strike, ministers claim it is because the king has lost his virtue and demand that he cultivate virtue first. Isn't that contradictory? Hyang then spoke with purpose. I know that many of you have been officials since before this dynasty was established. So why didn't you accuse King Taejo of losing his virtue when he founded this dynasty, while still a subject of Goryeo? Or, my grandfather, King Taejong, was he not wise when he raised his sword against his own brothers? Or was my father not virtuous when he ascended the throne instead of my uncle, the eldest son? At this, the court erupted in panicked pleas. Your Highness, that is not what we meant. Your Majesty, we have never harbored such wicked thoughts. We beg your Majesty, please grant us mercy. The king spoke at last. The crown prince's words were somewhat harsh. I hope the ministers will forgive him. Be mindful of your words. Hyang quickly replied, I will remember that, father. The king then turned to the ministers. Listen carefully. I too believe that the welfare of the people is of utmost importance. Furthermore, our tribute to the Ming Empire will proceed as the crown prince has planned. The ministers bowed their heads in acknowledgement, obeying the king's decree. Crown Prince, is there anything else you wish to add? Hyang promptly answered, I believe it would be better to pay the people with wheat for their labor, rather than simply giving them aid, father. The king was taken aback. Pay them with wheat, you say? Hyang elaborated. The primary cause of droughts is the lack of rainfall. The absence of proper irrigation systems and reservoirs is another critical factor. To prepare for future droughts, we must build reservoirs in every city and repair the existing ones. I believe we can mobilize the people to carry out this work and compensate them with food. By doing so, we can prevent future famine. Isn't this like killing 2 birds with 1 stone? What do you think, ministers? The king turned and asked. The ministers replied, We believe this is a good idea, your majesty. The king then ordered the crown prince to return to the palace. Hyang bowed respectfully and answered, Yes, father. Suddenly, the king remembered something and instructed Hyang to participate in court discussions after the ancestral ritual was completed. Thank you, father, for allowing this young and inexperienced son to take part in court affairs and discuss matters of state, Hyang responded before turning to leave. The king then stood up and formally ended the session for the day. Everyone was dismissed. Understood, your majesty, they all replied. However, before anyone could move, the king's voice deepened, turning serious. Perhaps I should also reconsider what you all truly think about this dynasty. Fear gripped the ministers as they hurriedly responded. Your majesty, we have never harbored any thoughts of disloyalty, not even once. Please have mercy on us. With a furious expression, the king shouted, Get back to work! Instantly, the ministers' voices filled the chamber, pleading for the king's forgiveness. As they left, hushed whispers spread among them. One wrong step, And blood could be spilled, one muttered. He carries not only the blood of King Taejong, but also the rulers before him. Prime Minister Sung interrupted. Enough of this nonsense. You all better watch your tongues. My only concern is the future of this nation. Is this truly the end of it all? He let out a long sigh, and others signaled him to be cautious. Do you not know that the mouth is the gateway to disaster? Remember someone? Sung sighed again. We've suffered a major setback today. We underestimated the Crown Prince simply because he is young. One minister frowned and asked, Then, what should we do now? Sung replied, If there is no other option, we may have to submit our resignations. At these words, the ministers exchanged uneasy glances. Resign? One of them murmured. Sung continued. However, it is our duty to counsel the king if he strays from the right path. Even ancient texts say that a wise ruler must listen to the voices of the people. I will ensure that the king remains a wise ruler, he declared meaningfully. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the queen inquired about the morning court session. I heard the crown prince caused quite a stir, she said. The king, looking exhausted, recounted how the crown prince had done nothing wrong. In fact, he had spoken exceptionally well. It was I who caused the commotion. I couldn't control myself and ended up speaking as I did when I was still the crown prince, the king admitted. The queen burst into laughter, tears welling up in her eyes. What a shame I couldn't witness that side of you, she said. Embarrassed, the king muttered, Enough, my queen. I'm already mortified. Yet, a smile crept onto his face. The queen observed him closely and said, Your expression seems brighter than before. Have you noticed? The king looked puzzled. Really? He asked. The queen poured tea into his cup. Speak freely. Besides, there's no need for your majesty to fear the scribe's pens, is there? She said, taking a sip. The king nodded. You're right. My priority should be my own peace of mind. Wise words, your majesty, the queen praised. The king then continued. I also informed the crown prince that he would participate in state discussions after the ancestral rites. The queen looked slightly concerned. Is that all right? The crown prince is still quite young. The king gave a small smile. I was satisfied with his conduct this morning and how he handled the matter of the scribes. I think everything will be fine. The more I observe him, the more he resembles a man in his 40s, the king remarked. The queen couldn't help but laugh. Not long ago, your majesty worried that the crown prince's intelligence would create a rift between you. But now, you seem more at ease, she said. The king nodded without hesitation. That's true. I do feel at ease now. Back in the palace, the king dismissed the eunuchs and maids. Once alone, he let out a deep sigh of relief. Should I let them reveal themselves, or should I force them out? He pondered, his mind in turmoil. Should I let everything end peacefully, or should I allow blood to be spilled? He wrestled with his thoughts. Many officials from his father's reign were still in the court. He needed ministers who were loyal only to him. When King Sejong issued the order, the Ministry of Taxation began producing golden pens to be sent as tribute to Emperor Yongle. However, a serious problem arose during the preparations. What did you just say? They can't meet the production deadline? A court official responded, Forgive me, your majesty. But the Merchants Guild responsible for producing the golden pens has reported that they are unable to complete the required quota on time. Just as he had expected, the Crown Prince said, Given the current state of the workshop, it's impossible to produce the golden pens on schedule. He then turned to the king and asked, Father, I'd like to confirm something. May I summon a representative from the Merchants Guild? Sung immediately objected. That is unacceptable. How can we allow lowly merchants to step into a place where the affairs of the nation are decided? But the king calmly replied, Inspector General, are you saying this because you already know the answer? Sung hesitated. Your Majesty, The king continued, I appreciate your loyalty. But why do you refuse everything outright instead of proposing an alternative solution? Lowering his head, Sung apologized. I beg your forgiveness, your Majesty. The king then gave the order to summon the merchant. Before long, a representative from the guild was brought in and knelt before the king. Your humble servant greets your Majesty, the merchant said. The king nodded. I have called you here because the Crown Prince has some questions for you. Answer truthfully. Yes, your Majesty, the merchant replied. The Crown Prince then spoke. I heard that your guild is unable to produce the golden pens on time. Why is that? The merchant explained. Golden pens are intricate works of art. We must be extremely careful in crafting each one. Even if we speed up the process, there are still limits to what we can do. The Crown Prince asked again, So, is it true that each pen is crafted entirely by a single artisan? That is correct, your Majesty, the merchant confirmed. The Crown Prince paused for a moment before turning to his father. Father, I have a solution, but I need to speak with the artisans from the guild first. Once again, Sungum protested. Your Majesty, first a lowly merchant, and now the Crown Prince wants to summon an artisan to this esteemed place? Please reconsider. But the king, losing patience, shouted, Silence! Why should I not call upon them when this concerns national affairs? Sung, still dissatisfied, tried to argue again. Your Majesty, I was only... The king cut him off sharply. If you continue to argue, I will begin to question your loyalty." The room fell into a heavy silence. No one dared to say another word. The king then gave the order to summon the artisans. When the artisans arrived, the crown prince greeted them. "I have heard that each artisan is responsible for the entire process of crafting a golden pen. Is that true?" The group knelt and responded, "Yes, your majesty." The crown prince continued, "I have a suggestion for you all. Instead of having one artisan complete an entire pen, why not divide the tasks? One person could shape the pen tip, another could refine it, and a third could engrave it. What do you think of this change?" The artisans exchanged surprised glances before responding. "That is possible, your majesty. We would need some time to adjust, but once we are accustomed to the new process, it should be faster than the way we currently work." The crown prince nodded in approval. "This is called division of labor," he explained. "When multiple people work together, they can produce a greater number of goods at a much faster rate." The king was impressed. "That makes sense. We will wait for good news from you all. You may go." Once everyone had left, the king turned to Jinho and asked, "Where did you come up with such a brilliant idea, Crown Prince?" The Crown Prince paused for a moment before replying. "When I visited the kitchen, I saw the assistants and helpers dividing their tasks according to the head chef's instructions. I remembered that and came up with this idea." The king burst into laughter. "This child finds brilliance in things most people overlook. The Crown Prince is truly extraordinary. What do the ministers think?" The officials all responded in unison. "We agree, your majesty. The Crown Prince is very wise." However, Sungum objected, saying, "I believe the Crown Prince is too focused on trivial matters. Your majesty, he should be using his sharp mind to study the teachings of the sages." The king firmly replied, "Why do you consider thinking and drawing meaning from things others ignore as something trivial? Are sages not also those who reflect on what is best for the nation and its people, then share their insights? Why are you so narrow-minded, Sungum?" Sungum lowered his head and replied, "I only wish for the best for the Crown Prince, your majesty." The king's expression darkened. "Is this what the Crown Prince mentioned the other day? That you think I and my ancestors are unfit to rule? Is that why you dare to say such absurd things?" Sung panicked and quickly clarified, "I would never dare harbor such disloyal thoughts, your majesty. Please understand." The Crown Prince observed the situation, realizing that his father's true nature was surfacing again. Sungum's words had indeed been somewhat narrow-minded, but the king's response was unnecessarily harsh. It was common for a ruler to showcase a talented heir, but using power to suppress those who disagreed was unbefitting of a true sovereign. Later, the Crown Prince returned to the Eastern Palace, closed the door, and sat in tense contemplation. He murmured to himself, "I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't come up with an example of division of labor in time." His thoughts deepened. "Lately, Father has been summoning me more often. I only wanted to stand out a little, but it seems I've dug my own grave instead. I didn't even realize that the concept of division of labor didn't exist in this era." The Crown Prince continued his reflections. Even before Adam Smith formalized the idea of division of labor, the concept had naturally existed for a long time. However, the transformation of labor division into an industrial principle was the result of an agreement between absolute monarchy and mercantilist policies. He pondered the state of his kingdom. What about Joseon? Though nominally an absolute monarchy, from a historical perspective, it was actually a struggle between kings seeking to maintain absolute power and officials advocating for a republic-like system. Meanwhile, the people desired a semi-republican government, one where the king loved his people more than the bureaucrats, a ruler who safeguarded the people's interests and granted them real power. Success would not happen overnight. He needed to build step by step to strengthen his father's rule. The Crown Prince thought even further. His father also wanted his authority to extend to the farthest reaches of the kingdom. To achieve that, he needed wealth. Filling the national treasury would be his first step. Resolute in his decision, the Crown Prince left the Eastern Palace and headed toward the main hall. The king was surprised to see him. "Why have you come here?" he asked. The Crown Prince calmly replied, "I have something to discuss." The room fell silent. The officials present were stunned, wondering what the Crown Prince was planning this time. The Crown Prince said, "I have something to discuss regarding the envoy from the Ming Empire. There is something that must be confirmed by the emperor." The king, curious, asked, "What is it?" The ministers whispered among themselves. "What is he thinking this time?" The Crown Prince smiled, silently analyzing the situation. "The first step to filling the royal treasury is securing a monopoly on golden-tipped pens. We need to ensure that Joseon merchants gain exclusive rights to trade these pens in the Ming Empire." The king furrowed his brows as the Crown Prince continued. "The Emperor of Ming keeps demanding more of these pens from us, which clearly shows how much they value them. The Ming Empire is many times larger than Joseon, so as I mentioned before, their demand for golden-tipped pens is far greater." The Crown Prince paused briefly before continuing. "Moreover, every time the chief envoy comes to our nation, they always demand excessive tribute. Therefore, we must request an imperial decree to limit their demands." A nervous Sung immediately interrupted. "Your Highness, that is impossible. The Ming Empire sees Joseon as a subordinate state. How dare a vassal complain about their lord's demands? That would be highly disrespectful." However, the Crown Prince challenged him. "How is it disrespectful? Are you saying it's acceptable for a great empire to oppress a smaller kingdom? Sung insisted. That's not the issue. If we suddenly reduce the tribute we've been offering all this time, there will undoubtedly be consequences. The Crown Prince grew frustrated. This old man always opposes me, he thought. Raising his voice, he said, "Do you know where all this tribute comes from? Isn't it the result of the hard work of our people? Furthermore, the amount of tribute the Ming Empire demands keeps increasing, which means less food for our people. At this rate, even the taxes that fill our royal treasury will dry up. Shouldn't we prevent this disaster before it happens?" Sung remained firm. "That is because your highness still does not fully understand state affairs. The people in these envoys are all eunuchs. They are the closest servants to the Ming emperor. If they speak ill of us to the emperor, we could face grave danger." The Crown Prince retorted sharply, "Do you really think the Ming emperor is a fool?" Sung stammered, "That's not what I meant. But your highness is still too young. I fear you may bring great harm in pursuit of minor gains." Now angered, the Crown Prince shot back, "What does this have to do with my age? Did you just say bringing great harm for minor gains?" He continued, "Every time a Ming envoy arrives, the tribute that they take stretches for miles. Isn't that wealth plundered from our treasury and our people?" Fixing his gaze on Sung the Crown Prince pressed on. "The wise men of ancient times said that a true official ensures the people can live in peace. Yet you insist on bowing to and serving these eunuchs. How can you possibly believe this is right?" Sung tried to respond. "Your Highness, you are exaggerating. We are not bowing to them." But the Crown Prince cut him off. "I am not finished. Seeking profit must never come at the cost of our nation's honor and dignity." He then quoted an ancient teaching, "A righteous man, even when living in luxury, still shows compassion. Even when seated at the highest position, he maintains his integrity and always follows the path of virtue and righteousness." Now tell me, surrendering our wealth and licking their feet, does that align with any of these three principles? If not, how dare you still call yourselves virtuous officials? After saying that, the Crown Prince knelt before his father and earnestly pleaded, "Father, please allow me to lead this envoy. This time, I will personally submit a petition to the Emperor of the Ming Empire and do everything I can to put an end to this unjust practice. I beg you, grant me your permission." He looked at the king with unwavering determination. "It is true that I am still young, only 9 years old, but my resolve stands taller than the highest mountain." The king massaged his temples, gazing at his son with deep consideration. "The journey to Beijing is long and full of hardships," he said heavily. However, the Crown Prince remained undaunted and replied, "Joseon is currently facing both crisis and opportunity. If we know how to seize it, this could lay the foundation for 1,000 years of prosperity. But if we fail, we will remain nothing more than a small, isolated nation." His eyes were filled with hope as he added, "I hope you understand my intentions." The king let out a long sigh and said, "Return to your quarters, Crown Prince." "Attendants, the Crown Prince seems too agitated. Escort him back and have him calm himself." Desperate, the Crown Prince cried out, "Please, father, please grant my request." But the king's command was absolute. With a heavy heart, the Crown Prince returned to the Eastern Palace. Once he arrived, frustration consumed him. He shouted, "Everyone, leave!" The attendants quickly exited, leaving him alone in the hall. His mind was in turmoil. "That damn Sung dares to look down on me just because I'm young. He has opposed me at every turn since the beginning. I won't let this slide. Just wait and see." His gaze sharpened. Then, calling for one of the eunuchs, he ordered, "Prepare for a journey to the Ming Empire." The eunuch was stunned. "What? Why so suddenly, your highness?" "I said, prepare my things now." Meanwhile, in the main hall, officials had gathered to discuss the matter. "Your Majesty, we cannot act as the Crown Prince suggests. We beg for your understanding, your Majesty." The king let out a deep sigh before speaking in a heavy voice. "Do you know how much sleep that child gets each day? No more than 6 hours. He is only 9 years old, yet he is already thinking about how to bring prosperity to this nation. And all of you do nothing but say, no, no, and no." The officials lowered their heads in shame. "We deserve to be sentenced to death, your Majesty. We deserve to be sentenced to death." Suddenly, a palace servant rushed in, panic written all over his face. "Your Majesty, there's a serious problem. The Crown Prince is preparing to leave." Everyone was stunned. The king's eyes widened as he exclaimed, "Where is he going?" A eunuch answered nervously, "It seems the Crown Prince intends to go to the Ming Empire." For a moment, the king stood frozen. Then, fury overtook him, and he slammed his hand down on the table. "That insolent boy! Does he think he can do whatever he pleases?" Fuming with rage, the king stormed out of the hall and hurried toward the Crown Prince's quarters. As he arrived, he spotted 2 eunuchs leaving the room. "You there! Stop right where you are!" he commanded. The 2 eunuchs immediately turned and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, we offer our respects." The king glared at them. "Aren't you eunuchs from the Eastern Palace? Where do you think you're going?" One of the eunuchs hesitated before finally stammering, We were on our way to the royal secretariat, your Majesty." The king narrowed his eyes. "For what purpose?" Swallowing hard, the eunuch replied, "We were ordered to record all the tribute items given to the Ming envoys since the reign of the late King Taizong." Silence filled the air. The king's expression darkened even further. Then suddenly fury burned in his eyes as he growled. "Just what is that boy planning?" Meanwhile, in the Empress's chambers, a servant came running from outside, her voice filled with panic. "Your Majesty, the Empress, there's a serious problem." The Empress turned, startled. "Why all the commotion?" The servant, still catching her breath, finally managed to say, "The Crown Prince is packing his belongings. He's preparing to leave for the Ming Empire." The Empress's eyes widened in shock. Upon hearing this, real concern filled her voice as she exclaimed, "The Crown Prince is planning to go to the Ming Empire? Does he think this is just a simple stroll through the village? How did this happen?" The servant quickly responded, "He wants to stop the Ming envoys from demanding excessive tributes. A minister from the Ministry of Justice claimed the Crown Prince was overreacting, and that's why he decided to take matters into his own hands." After a brief pause, the servant added, "And the king is already on his way to the Eastern Palace." Hearing this, the Empress furrowed her brows. Her expression showed clear tension and concern. Without wasting another second, she rushed out of her chambers, running toward the Eastern Palace. Her thoughts raced. "What exactly are you doing, my son?" The palace attendants hurried behind her, calling out, "Your Majesty, the Empress!" Meanwhile, in the Eastern Palace, the king could no longer contain his fury. He pointed directly at the Crown Prince and shouted, "You insolent child! What is the meaning of this reckless behavior?" With unwavering resolve, the Crown Prince replied firmly, "This is not reckless. I am simply fulfilling my duty as the Crown Prince." Outside the hall, ministers stood in neat rows, but none dared to step inside. The king's furious voice echoed throughout the palace. "You foolish boy! Do you even realize how old you are? How could you act so recklessly?" The Crown Prince responded firmly, "Age is no barrier to doing what is right. It is merely an excuse for people to claim someone is too young to take action." The king's anger flared even more. "Why are you acting so irresponsibly?" Just then, the Empress arrived, breathless, and called out, "Hyang!" But the Crown Prince refused to back down. With unwavering determination, he declared, "If you are the father of our people, then I wish to be their elder brother. Every time an envoy comes and goes, our people suffer in silence. How can I stand by and do nothing?" Furious at his son's defiance, the king clenched his teeth and roared, "This boy, to the very end." Finally, the king gave his command. "Head eunuch, bring me the punishment rod and the discipline bench." Gasps filled the air. Everyone outside was stunned and worried. Panic overtook the Empress as she rushed toward the hall, crying out, "Your Majesty!" The palace attendants behind her were equally alarmed. The moment the Empress burst through the doors, she desperately pleaded, "The Crown Prince is only 9 years old." The king frowned and retorted, "Precisely because he is still young, he must be disciplined and taught a lesson. This is not your place to interfere." Then, turning to the eunuchs, he commanded, "Escort the Empress out of the hall." Fear gripped the Empress. In desperation, she shouted one last plea before the eunuchs could take her away. "Your Majesty, please show mercy." The first strike landed harshly on the Crown Prince's legs. With each blow, the king roared in fury. "Your first mistake was growing arrogant over your little knowledge. Your second mistake was failing to respect those who serve you and not knowing how to conduct yourself properly." Despite his young age, the Crown Prince did not cry out or make a sound. He merely clenched his teeth and endured the pain. His legs were now covered in deep red welts from the relentless strikes. Yet, the king showed no sign of stopping. He continued, "Your third mistake was disobeying your father's command. Reflect on your actions today and make sure this never happens again." Outside the hall, the Empress could hear everything. Her sobs had long dried into silent despair. The ministers stood stiffly, their eyes fixed anxiously on the closed doors. At last, the doors swung open. After administering the severe punishment, the king took heavy breaths before stepping out and giving a final order. "Summon the royal physician to treat the Crown Prince." Everyone quickly responded in unison, "Yes, Your Majesty." As the king walked past them, he noticed the Empress still sobbing. He ordered her to take care of the Crown Prince. Then, glancing at the ministers, he left them with one final remark. "You chatterboxes are no better than children." One of the ministers couldn't hold back and muttered, "How could the Crown Prince act this way?" Another minister, noticing the Empress was still nearby, quickly warned, "Quiet! The Empress can hear you!" The Empress, her voice filled with fury, turned to the ministers and scolded, "All of you! How is it that a child could see what you all failed to, allowing things to get this bad? I will never forget what happened today." The ministers lowered their heads in shame and could only reply, "We deserve to die." In the Crown Prince's chamber, the Empress scolded her son, repeatedly smacking his bottom. "You little troublemaker, why do you always make me worry? You can't keep acting like this. Do you understand?" The Crown Prince cried out in pain. Lying on his stomach, he thought to himself, "In both my past life and this one, my small legs have endured too much." After a moment, the Crown Prince was surprised. The Empress had stopped hitting him. Instead, she was silently crying, heartbroken. Then she leaned down and embraced him. "I have no one left now but the two of you." Hearing this, the Crown Prince softly replied, "I'm sorry, mother." The scene shifts to the royal palace. The king sat tall on his throne, looking down at the gathered officials before turning to the eunuch. "Eunuch, Bring me the documents the Crown Prince had you prepare. The eunuch quickly responded, Yes, Your Majesty. Right away. After presenting a stack of documents, the king carefully reviewed them. With a firm voice, he stated, The smallest tribute they demand is equivalent to 2 months of our annual treasury, while the largest can reach up to 5 months. Holding up the documents, he questioned, Do you see this? This is the record of tributes given to the Ming Empire over the years. The amount we send has only increased. If we also count the goods looted from small villages, the total equals nearly a full year's budget. What do you have to say about this? The ministers remained silent. Furious, the king slammed his hand against his chair and bellowed, Why won't you answer me? Even a mere child like the Crown Prince has thought about this, yet none of you have? The ministers lowered their heads and replied in unison, We sincerely apologize, Your Majesty. The king then issued a stern order. Select the envoy representative and his aides within 2 hours, then report back to me. If you fail to decide within that time, I will charge you all with treason. The ministers quickly responded, Your wish is our command. That night, as the king gazed at the moon, the silence was broken by the empress's voice. Your Majesty, the king turned to her and asked, What is it, Empress? She answered, I stepped outside for some fresh air. I couldn't sleep. After a brief pause, she hesitated before speaking. Your Majesty, why did you punish the Crown Prince so harshly today? I feel like you were even stricter than usual. The king was silent for a moment before replying. The Crown Prince is a smart child. Hearing this, the Empress looked up and the king continued. But there are times when he gets too caught up in his own intelligence. Today, he faced opposition from the ministers. And this is the result. A tree that grows too straight can be easily broken. Without the trust of the ministers, how can he ever rule the people properly? The Empress remained silent, watching him closely. The king added, I believe the Crown Prince was born with the qualities of a wise ruler. That is why, from now on, I will teach him to the best of my ability, guiding him toward the right path. Hearing this, the Empress gave a soft smile and replied, I may not fully understand the deeper meaning behind your actions, but I have no objections if this is the path you wish to take. Despite the severe punishment he gave the Crown Prince, the king wasted no time in ordering the ministers to select the envoy and his aides. While the Crown Prince's actions were extreme, nothing he said was wrong. However, it was true that his approach had crossed the limits of what the king could tolerate, so he was punished. The Crown Prince rested his chin on his hand, watching his 2 younger brothers play in the courtyard, especially the one closest to his age. That boy was Yu, his younger brother, but he was no ordinary child. In the future, that boy would drench the palace in blood. Yu would become the 7th king of Joseon, King Seijo, as far as he could remember. After killing the rightful crown prince, King Moonjong, Yu would pave the way for Moonjong's nephew, King Danjong, to ascend the throne. He would lead the great rebellion known as Gyeyu Jungnan, eliminating all who stood against him. But his ambition wouldn't stop there. During his reign, Yu would even poison his own brother, Prince Ampyong, just to secure his power. The massive rebellion King Seijo led in 1453 was a calculated move to wipe out the closest allies of the reigning monarch. I remember my teacher once telling me about this man, Prince Suyang. He abandoned his younger brother, betrayed his older brother, turned against his own grandfather and father, and cast a dark shadow over Joseon's golden era. Most historians viewed Prince Suyang negatively, and that thought alone was deeply unsettling. That innocent-looking boy would grow into a tyrant. The Crown Prince pondered deeply. What should I do? I have to act before he shows any signs of becoming a monster. Suddenly, a smile crept onto his lips as an idea struck him. I see. That's the best way to change someone. His grin widened as he stepped toward his younger brothers. With careful education and everything I've learned, I'll make sure he serves under me until his last breath. A strange chill ran down Yu's spine. Why, did I just feel a sudden shiver? The Crown Prince approached them and greeted them. Yi Yu was Prince Suyang's birth name, while Yi Yong was Prince Anpyong's. The 2 children politely bowed and replied, Good morning, brother. The Crown Prince nodded warmly. It makes me happy to see you both in such high spirits. Then he turned to his younger brother and asked, Your writing class will start soon, right? Would you like to study with me today? Yu blinked in surprise at the odd question. He hesitated before asking, Why? Caught off guard, the Crown Prince stammered. Why are you asking that? I'm just curious to see how your studies are going. But deep inside, he thought, Soon, you'll be working tirelessly under my command. You won't have the luxury of idling around like this. Yu frowned, clearly skeptical of his brother's words. In the end, he turned away and said, No, I can study on my own. The Crown Prince called after him desperately, Yu, wait! But Yu simply grabbed his younger brother Yong's hand and said coldly, Let's go. We shouldn't play here anymore. We're disturbing brother. Yu didn't seem particularly angry, but there was a hint of displeasure on his face as he walked away. Time passed and evening arrived. Yu ran excitedly toward the dining hall, his voice full of joy. Yay! It's almost dinner time. The maid following him gently reminded, Prince, running like that is dangerous. At a corner of the hallway, Yu overheard a group of servants whispering among themselves. Their hushed conversation piqued his curiosity, making him pause to listen. He peeked around the corner quietly. Isn't the Crown Prince simply amazing? One servant gushed. So young, yet already excelling in literature. Not only that, but he's also well versed in state affairs. How can someone be born a prodigy like that? It's truly incredible. Yu's ears perked up, hoping they would mention him next. But the more he hoped, the more disappointment sank in. While the Crown Prince continued to receive endless praise, the conversation soon turned into comparisons. Yes, the second prince is intelligent as well, but compared to the Crown Prince, those words made Yu tremble with anger. The maid standing behind him finally noticed and rushed forward in outrage. How dare you speak like that? The two servants, startled to realize they had been overheard, immediately bowed their heads and apologized. Just as the maid was about to drag them away for severe punishment, Yu stopped her by pulling on her sleeve. Let it go. Let's just leave. Even as a child, Yu understood. Disappointment flickered across his face. Though he appeared calm, deep down, he wondered, what have I done to be considered lesser than my brother? A few days later, Hyang once again gathered his two younger brothers in his private chamber, trying to strengthen their bond. With a proud grin, he held up two handmade flashcards and declared, "This is how these characters are written. This one represents ski, and this one is earth." One side of the card displayed a character, while the other had an illustration. They looked fascinating. Yang's eyes lit up as he exclaimed, "Wow, did you make these?" Hyang replied proudly, "Of course. I asked the palace eunuchs to help me make them." These flashcards were his way of spending more time with his younger brothers. I had the eunuchs create these memory cards in just one day to help us learn Chinese characters. Now, studying will be much more fun. With a bright smile, he called out, "Come on, take a look." But you refused. "I'm not interested. I already have my own tutor, so I don't need them." Hyang was taken aback. "Wouldn't it be more fun if we studied together?" Before he could finish his sentence, Yu cut him off with a firm response. "I can handle it myself." Turning away, he added coldly, "Please don't call me for things like this again." His words left both Hyang and Yang shocked and confused. The next day, Yu sat with his tutor in the courtyard, diligently studying. Meanwhile, Hyang crouched behind a bush nearby, secretly observing them. "This boy is harder to figure out than I thought. I need to watch what he does every day," he mused. The tutor asked, "Don't you find this part difficult?" Yu smiled and replied, "Not at all. Your teaching method is very clear, so I don't find it hard at all." His polite and well-mannered attitude left Hyang stunned. He's much better than I expected. What is this? Is he only difficult when it comes to me?" The tutor continued. "All right then, let's review the 3 fundamental relationships and the 5 cardinal virtues we studied yesterday." Yu responded respectfully, "Yes, master." Without hesitation, he began reciting. "The loyalty of the people to their ruler. The king is the head of his subjects. A child's filial duty to his father. The father is the head of his son. A wife's devotion to her husband. The husband is the head of his wife." Hyang couldn't believe what he was hearing. Not only had Yu mastered the 1,000-character classic, but he had also memorized the 3 fundamental relationships and the 5 cardinal virtues. Suddenly, Hyang recalled something his own tutor had once said. There were rumors about Grand Prince Suyang. People said that while he might not have been as accomplished as King Munjong, he was still quite talented in literature and martial arts. The only issue was that his older brother was simply too exceptional, but perhaps, to some extent, that was only a rumor. As if realizing something, Hyang focused his gaze on the hard-working boy before him. What this child truly needs is... That afternoon, during sword training, Yu practiced intensely with a wooden training dummy. As he struck it, a loud sound startled him, causing him to drop his sword. The heavy blade rolled across the ground and stopped at Hyang's feet. Hyang picked up the sword and asked, "Looks like you've been training in martial arts?" Then, with a curious smile, he added, "How about teaching me a few sword techniques? I don't know much about swordsmanship since I've only studied literature until now." Yu, though slightly annoyed, didn't refuse. Swinging his sword effortlessly, he simply said, "It's not that difficult, just do it like this." Standing beside him, Hyang nodded thoughtfully and muttered, "That doesn't look easy." Lifting his sword high, he asked, "Is this how you do it?" But as soon as the sword was raised above his head, Hyang lost control. Unable to maintain his balance, he stumbled backward and fell flat on the ground. "Ow!" Hyang winced in pain. Yu stood there, stunned, silently watching his older brother sprawled on the ground. Grumbling, Hyang muttered, "Damn it, I knew this wasn't going to be easy." Trying to sit up, he sighed. "I'd really appreciate it if you could teach your helpless older brother. I have no talent for this." Then, looking at Yu with sincerity, he added, "Please, it's my request." Yu furrowed his brows, considering his brother's plea. He fell silent for a moment, deep in thought, before suddenly letting out a mocking laugh. "Why are you so bad at this?" As the sun began to set, Hyang and Yu grew closer through their sword training. Hyang constantly exposed his weaknesses while praising his younger brother. "Is this the right way?" Yu shook his head. "Don't lower your hands too much, raise them a little higher." At their core, children have simple hearts. No matter how hard you tried, the people around him always compared him to his older brother, making him feel inadequate. It left him frustrated. But now, seeing that his brother also had weaknesses, and was even worse than him in some areas, restored a sense of balance. Because of that, Yu slowly started opening up, allowing Hyang to get closer. His attitude toward his older brother became noticeably warmer. The first step in changing the future tyrant had been taken. One bright morning, two noblewomen were engaged in lively conversation. The woman in the yellow gown whispered curiously, "Have you heard about the flashcards made by the Crown Prince?" The woman in the blue dress nodded with a smile. "Of course I have. They say those cards are incredibly useful." "Oh, really?" The woman in yellow's eyes sparkled with interest. The woman in blue nodded again. "Yes, apparently learning has become much more enjoyable with those cards." The conversation made the woman in yellow think deeply. With hopeful eyes, she asked, "Do you think those memory cards could help my child learn Chinese characters more easily?" The woman in blue smiled. "I think so. The power of word-of-mouth recommendations shouldn't be underestimated." Later that day, upon returning home, the woman in yellow spoke to her husband, a royal official. "My dear, I heard that the flashcards created by the Crown Prince are extremely effective." The official looked surprised. "Where did you hear that?" he asked, raising an eyebrow in curiosity. "I came across it by chance," she replied. "Do you think we could get some as well? I want to use them to teach our children." The official stroked his beard and said, "I'm not so sure." But his wife wasn't ready to give up. "Why don't you try speaking to His Highness, the Crown Prince?" The official hesitated, feeling uneasy about asking the Crown Prince for a favor. However, his wife scolded him firmly. "Is your pride more important than our child's education? This could impact our family's future." As it turned out, their family wasn't the only one interested in the Crown Prince's flashcards. Several other officials' families had also heard about their effectiveness. Finally, they gathered and requested an audience with the young Crown Prince. As they expressed their request, the Crown Prince shook his head. "These cards were made specifically for my younger brother." The officials looked desperate and pleaded, "Then please just sell them to us. No matter the price, we're willing to pay." The Crown Prince sighed and eventually relented. "If you want them that badly, I suppose I have no choice." He held up 3 fingers and said, "The price is 3 Esion per set, which is equivalent to 159 kilograms of white rice." The officials were stunned and exchanged glances. Finally, one of them gathered the courage to ask, "What do you mean? Is one set of these cards really worth 159 kilograms of rice?" The Crown Prince smiled. "Not exactly. In fact, part of the cost covers the materials for making the cards, part goes to the national treasury, and the rest is for my personal use." One of the officials, intrigued, asked, "Personal use? What do you mean by that?" The Crown Prince replied casually, "To buy books. For various reasons, books have become quite expensive lately." The officials fell silent, exchanging looks. Eventually, one of them couldn't hold back any longer and said, "Fine, I'll buy them. My wife has been pestering me to get these cards." Once one person made a move, the rest quickly followed. "I want to buy them too," another official declared, raising his hand. Before long, more and more officials lined up to purchase the Crown Prince's flashcards. This innovative product soon became highly sought after among the royal nobility. The Crown Prince smiled in satisfaction and said, "All right, it's a deal." He felt pleased, knowing that he could now fully pursue his passion. He thought he had found a way to make money. But there was something even more important to take care of: his father's health. At the king's private residence, a feast had been laid out. The king glanced around anxiously, ensuring there were no unwelcome guests before lowering his gaze to the plate of meat before him. He reached for a piece of roasted meat with his chopsticks, but suddenly a loud noise startled him. The king flinched, dropping his food. The young Crown Prince stormed in, his voice filled with frustration. "Father, are you only eating meat again?" The king grumbled. "What are you doing here, you brat?" The two immediately began bickering, neither willing to back down. "You know, even disturbing a dog while it eats is a sin," the king growled. "Healthy eating is the best way to maintain your health," the Crown Prince retorted. Outside, the servants exchanged nervous glances. "Should we pull him out of there?" one of them whispered. "Wait until His Majesty gives the order," another replied. Back at the dining table, the king slammed his fist against the table in frustration. "What do you mean this food isn't healthy?" he demanded angrily. The Crown Prince pointed at the 3 dishes on the table. "Look at this: roast chicken, slightly charred roast pork, and stir-fried beef with onions." He picked up the plates and raised his voice. "And you call this a balanced meal? It's all meat! You haven't even touched the vegetables." The king fell silent, unable to argue. The servants watching the scene quickly dropped to their knees and pleaded, "Your Highness, please stop. His Majesty has already been under a lot of stress lately." It all started when the Crown Prince became obsessed with King Sejong's diet. He grew overly concerned about his father's eating habits. Amidst his busy schedule, he would often sneak into the dining hall with a book in hand and say, "According to the Yuan dynasty's dietary guidelines, one must consume a variety of vegetables to live a long and healthy life." Not stopping there, the Crown Prince even visited the royal kitchen to give direct instructions to the cooks. "Use less salt. Redo this dish. Too much meat." Though reluctant, the royal chefs couldn't refuse the Crown Prince's orders. Even during meals with the emperor, the Crown Prince wouldn't stop nagging. "Too much meat thickens the blood. Thick blood puts stress on both the mind and body. If you're not careful, it could affect your head. and if a king's mind is clouded, the stability of the nation could be at risk. Every mealtime, the king had to endure his son's long-winded lectures. The servants could see the irritation on his face. They knew he was reaching his limit. As expected, the king finally snapped. He pointed at the crown prince and shouted, "You brat! I've tolerated this because you're still young, but I can't take it anymore." Furious, the king ordered, "Get the crown prince out of here. Don't let him anywhere near me when I'm eating." The crown prince was powerless as he was grabbed and dragged out of the room. Only one word escaped his lips. "Father." Deep down, he thought, "I can't let this continue. If this goes on, that old man will fall ill." The crown prince knew that the king's health had to be maintained so he could rule for a long time. Only then could he enjoy a comfortable future. The servant who had dragged him out bowed and said, "Forgive me, your highness." Standing outside his father's chambers, the crown prince was lost in thought. His mind raced, searching for a way to save his father's health. His diet is a serious problem. What can I do to keep that old man healthy? Meanwhile, inside the room, the king bellowed, "Bring me more meat!" Just then, the crown prince had an idea. There's still one way. Without wasting time, he rushed to the palace workshop to begin his new project. At the workshop, the royal craftsmen were struggling to follow his orders. "Wrong! It needs to be rounder," he commanded. "Yes, your highness," a craftsman replied as he continued working. However, the crown prince's strange behavior left everyone puzzled. "Why is his highness asking us to make something so odd?" they murmured among themselves. Day after day, the crown prince visited the workshop, making sure his project was progressing as planned. After much effort, the woodworkers finally presented the finished product to him. "Your highness, it's done," one of the craftsmen reported. But the moment the crown prince picked it up and applied slight pressure, the object broke in two. Furious, he shouted, "Not like this. Make it stronger. Do it again and make sure it's sturdier this time." The workshop echoed with the crown prince's demands. "Rounder, stronger." After several days of hard work, the crown prince finally stood confidently before the emperor and the royal officials, holding his creation. The king eyed him suspiciously. "What now?" he asked, sounding weary. The crown prince stepped forward, presenting the object with both hands, and declared, "I created this for your health, father. This is a durable jump rope." The king frowned. "Is this really good for my health? Isn't this just an ordinary rope?" The crown prince grinned and explained, "No, father. This is part of my brilliant plan to keep you in shape." After working day and night, the crown prince finally presented the jump rope and a bell as health management tools. "This is a great way to stay fit, father. It's called jump rope," he said. The king still looked doubtful. "How can jumping rope make me healthier?" he wondered. Seeing his father's confusion, the crown prince grabbed his invention and prepared for a demonstration. "Father, let me show you how it works," he said enthusiastically. The king nodded, allowing him to proceed. The crown prince hung the bell around his neck, then firmly gripped the jump rope with both hands. He started jumping, demonstrating the basic movements familiar to modern people. The entire palace, including the king, watched with curiosity. After a while, the crown prince stopped, panting. "This is how you use a jump rope," he said proudly. He was prepared to back up his claim. Raising an English book, he declared, "Father, according to Western scholars, people who sit too much tend to have weak lower bodies. But here, it says that jumping rope strengthens the legs and improves overall health." The king began to ponder, but still wasn't entirely convinced. Would he accept the crown prince's idea or stubbornly reject it? Despite his skepticism, the king finally agreed to give it a try. The crown prince called over a servant and handed him the bell. "As father jumps, you must count 100 jumps in rhythm with the bell," he instructed. With deep emotion, he added, "My greatest wish is for father to live a long and healthy life." The king could no longer refuse. Reluctantly, he moved to the courtyard to begin his training. "Father, let me tie this bell on you," said the crown prince. The king hesitated, staring at him. "Do I really have to wear this?" he wondered. The crown prince nodded with determination. Once the bell was secured around his neck, the king snorted, "Do I look like a pig now?" The crown prince couldn't hold back his laughter. He burst into laughter. The king glared. "What are you laughing at?" The crown prince quickly straightened up. "Nothing, father. All right, let's begin." With slight hesitation, the king swung the rope and started jumping. Unfortunately, since his body wasn't used to exercise, he was already out of breath after just a few jumps. Panting, he turned to the servant and asked, "How many jumps did I do?" The servant answered honestly, 9 times, your majesty." The king was shocked. "Only 9? He turned to the crown prince, attempting to negotiate. "Since it's my first time, let's lower the number of jumps." But the crown prince crossed his arms and firmly shook his head. "No, father, you must keep going. I will stay here until you reach 100 jumps." The king nearly cried at his son's determination. Before long, news of the king's jump rope training spread throughout the palace. Officials gathered, whispering about what was happening. "Are you all still here?" one of them asked anxiously. 2 royal physicians who happened to be nearby grew curious. "What's going on?" one of them asked. With a serious expression, the man replied, "The king just coughed." One of the doctors frowned and said, "Doesn't his majesty usually cough around this time?" But the serious-looking man exclaimed, "That's not the point. The important thing is that after coughing, he ran straight to the toilet. This news was quite surprising because ever since the king started his daily jump rope routine, he had undergone a significant change. In the past, he would only relieve himself once every 3 days, but now he was going to the bathroom every day. Even the palace servants congratulated him on his improved health. He could now stay up late reviewing court documents, and for some reason, he was visiting the queen's residence more frequently than before. Of course, the queen's residence was where the empress lived. Rumors quickly spread among the officials. Have you heard? The king has been diligently jumping rope, and he rushes to the toilet immediately after coughing. His skin has also been looking better lately. Everything seems connected. One official whispered, "Don't tell me. It's because of jump rope?" Another nodded in agreement. They sighed and began sharing their own health complaints. "I haven't been feeling well lately." "Me too. I can't sleep properly at all." "My wife complains every night." After finishing their conversation, they exchanged glances. One afternoon, while the crown prince was quietly studying, a sudden commotion called for him. Startled, he looked up to see a group of palace officials approaching in a panic. Without hesitation, they spoke up, bombarding him with requests. "Can you make more skipping ropes? You can ask for as much rice as you want." "That's right. I want to buy one for my wife and child. I need one for myself too." The ministers were scrambling to get their hands on a skipping rope. The situation quickly descended into chaos, resembling a classroom full of preschoolers. The crown prince finally raised his voice. "Please, speak one at a time." This success had far exceeded his expectations. Without wasting any time, he rushed back to the woodworking workshop and told the craftsman, "We have a lot of work to do. From now on, everyone will have a specialized task. One person will make the ropes, another will craft the handles, and someone else will attach the bells." The workers wept, resigned to their fate. The crown prince was truly working them to the bone. Then he made an announcement. "Now, make 500 more." Deep inside, they felt nothing but despair. They grumbled, "Just kill us already. We're human too." The crown prince's invention sparked a health revolution. Families across the nation could now jump rope together. With healthier husbands and happier wives, people praised the incredible changes brought about by such a simple idea. Sometimes, even the smallest things can have a huge impact. The crown prince was truly a genius. After collecting rice from the officials, he stored it all in his private warehouse. Standing before a mountain of rice, he crossed his arms and chuckled in satisfaction. "I'm making money faster than I expected." But his ambitions didn't stop there. He wanted more. Despite all the praise he had received, murmurs of criticism began to spread among senior officials. They whispered that the crown prince was becoming too famous for his innovations. "I heard he's even selling them to high-ranking ministers." "Hoarding wealth is not the way of a wise man," they muttered. One of the more experienced senior officials calmed the others. "Relax, let's wait for the right moment. As the saying goes, great things grow from small beginnings." Another minister added, "If the crown prince becomes arrogant and fails to justify his actions, he will bring about his own downfall." With those words, the other officials chose to be patient and observe the situation further. Meanwhile, time continued to pass, and at last, the long-awaited diplomatic mission had arrived. The royal envoys prepared to depart for Ming. The Minister of Foreign Trade proposed bringing a trade agreement for the Ming Empire. The king listened to the proposal and discussed it with his advisors before finally granting his approval. Crown Prince Hyang stood gazing at the sky, lost in thought. However, his daydream was interrupted by the cheerful voice of a young girl calling out to him. "Hey Hyang, do you know what this is?" Princess Jongso, the elder sister of King Moonjong, approached him, holding a plate of colorful, intricately shaped snacks. Hyang hesitated for a moment before answering uncertainly. "Is it yakgwa?" Jongso burst into laughter and patted him on the back. "Wrong. This is dasik. You've been studying for 100 days, and you still don't know?" she teased. Dasik was a traditional Korean confection often served with tea. Jongso kept teasing him. "You should go outside and take a walk instead of reading books in the palace all day. If you keep this up, you'll end up like father." At her words, Hyang pictured his father, round and plump. He frowned and retorted, annoyed, "I'm still better than you." Jongso simply smiled and waved as she walked away. "Just make sure to study hard." As she passed by the palace attendants, she politely greeted one of them. "Good morning, Chief Eunuch." The eunuch responded respectfully. "Did your highness sleep well last night?" As Hyang continued walking, he muttered to himself, "She always teases me like that." Yet he understood. It was just her nature at that age. His thoughts drifted toward the future. He watched Jongso smiling brightly in the distance. In 2 years, that smile would disappear forever. Jongso would become the source of sorrow throughout the palace. She would die of smallpox. Smallpox was completely eradicated in modern times, but in history, it was one of humanity's most feared diseases. It caused high fever and widespread rashes, leaving deep scars. Worse, it claimed countless lives, even within the royal family. That grim reality weighed heavily on Hyang's mind, making him realize how fragile life was, even for those who lived within the grand walls of the palace. During the medieval era, smallpox had a terrifying mortality rate of 30%. No wonder it was considered one of the 3 deadliest disasters, alongside tigers and war. King Sejong was devastated when his daughter succumbed to smallpox. After all, she was his beloved firstborn. But Hyang would not let history repeat itself. With unwavering determination, he swore to find a solution. He already had a plan. The scene shifts to Hyang standing before a cow. With a confident expression, he asked an elderly servant, "This cow has smallpox, doesn't it?" The cow's owner knelt respectfully and answered, "Yes, Your Highness." Hyang smiled confidently. "Perfect. You will be the key to everything." The royal guards exchanged puzzled looks, confused by the crown prince's intentions. They were now on Neobeol Island, what would one day be known as Uido Island. The land here was not fertile for farming, so the people relied more on livestock than agriculture. Hyang questioned the shepherds kneeling before him. "Who among you has never had smallpox? Raise your hand." A farmer dressed in brown raised his hand and said, "I haven't, Your Highness." Hyang stared at him intently and asked again, "Did you start raising cattle before or after that?" The farmer replied, "Since before I came to Neobeol Island, Your Highness." Hyang grew even more intrigued and continued his questioning. "Has there ever been a smallpox outbreak on this island?" One of the farmers hesitantly answered, "Yes, there has, Your Highness." Hyang's eyes lit up. "I knew it," he thought. He recalled Edward Jenner, the scientist who discovered the world's first smallpox vaccine. Jenner realized that those who had been infected with cowpox would not contract human smallpox. From this discovery, he developed a vaccination technique that eventually saved millions of lives. Turning back to the farmers, Hyang asked, "Who among you knows the secret method?" An old man dressed in white stepped forward and said, "I do, Your Highness." Without hesitation, Hyang extended his hand and said, "Do it to me." The farmer was startled, thinking he had misheard. "Your Highness, are you serious?" he asked, his voice trembling with fear. With unwavering determination, Hyang handed him a needle. "Yes, I want you to use that method on me right now." Meanwhile, in the royal palace, the king was listening to his ministers' reports on the kingdom's finances. "Our financial situation is dire. We have no choice but to raise taxes," one of the ministers said grimly. But, before the discussion could continue, a servant suddenly rushed in, his face pale with panic. "Your Majesty, there's an urgent matter," he said, gasping for breath. The king, who had been sitting calmly on his throne, asked in a serious tone, "What happened?" The servant stepped closer and whispered in the king's ear, "It's about the crown prince. He tried to take his own life." The king's expression instantly changed, from composed to alarmed. He bolted upright and shouted, "What do you mean? Where is the crown prince now?" The ministers were stunned by the king's reaction. They exchanged confused and worried glances. "What's going on?" they murmured among themselves. The servant explained that the crown prince had just returned to the palace. Overcome with anxiety, the king hurried out in a panic. Eventually, he spotted the crown prince walking in the distance and called out, "Hyang!" Hearing the frantic call, the palace attendants and the crown prince himself were startled. King Sejong rushed forward, breathing heavily. "Where have you been? Are you hurt?" Hyang, bewildered by his father's reaction, could only stammer, "No, father. I'm fine. What's going on?" The king's face darkened, his anger beginning to rise. He turned to the servant and demanded an explanation. "Tell me, what happened?" The servant nervously replied, "Your Majesty, I only repeated what the eunuch told me." Eunuch. O immediately fell to his knees, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty, I deserve to die, but I swear I did not lie." The king's fury intensified. "Are you mocking me? I was told the crown prince tried to end his life." At that moment, Hyang spoke up from behind. "Father, the eunuch didn't lie. I believe this is about what happened in Neobeol." The king looked at him in confusion. "What are you talking about, crown prince?" Hyang took a deep breath and explained, "It's just a misunderstanding. I've been researching a disease that frequently appears and spreads among the people." Recognizing the description, the king asked, "Are you talking about smallpox?" Hyang smiled and replied, "Exactly, father. While studying medical texts from China, I discovered a method to treat this disease. So, I took pus from an infected cow and injected it into myself." The king fell silent at his son's words. His face paled, his mind reeling in disbelief. A pounding headache overtook him, and in an instant, he collapsed on the spot. The ministers and Hyang cried out in panic, "Father, wake up! Father!" After a while, the king finally regained consciousness. However, his expression was still filled with shock. With a trembling voice, he asked, "So, you're telling me that you injected cow pus into your body?" Hyang calmly nodded. "Yes, father." King Sejong still couldn't believe what he had just heard. "You must not know what pus is." Before he could finish his sentence, Hyang interrupted with a small chuckle. "Of course I do. Pus comes from the wounds of an infected cow." The king tried to suppress his anger and asked, "So, the procedure you mentioned, you only applied the pus to your skin, correct?" However, Hyang casually replied, "No, father. I used a needle to inject it into my body." The king's eyes widened and his fury exploded. He stepped forward, grabbed Hyang's shoulders, and shouted, "You reckless child! How dare you do something like this just because you read about it in a book?" Hyang tried to explain, "Father, I'm fine. Someone experienced performed the procedure on me." The king was stunned. What? What? Who? Hyang pointed at someone among the servants. Him, father. A man dressed in simple clothing immediately bowed deeply. Your Majesty, I am merely a humble servant assisting the Crown Prince. Hyang then introduced the man. Father, this man is a shepherd from Neobeol Island. He is the one who performed the procedure. He said this is a secret technique passed down for generations to treat smallpox. King Sejong still couldn't believe it and turned to one of the cattle herders. The herder respectfully replied, Yes, Your Majesty, that is true. The king approached Hyang and, in a softer voice, asked, Crown Prince, are you telling me that this so-called experienced person is a mere cattle herder? Hyang answered confidently, Yes, father. He has cured everyone on the island. But the king raised his voice once again. Even so, you should never use yourself as a test subject. What were you thinking? You are the Crown Prince. Hyang did not back down and firmly replied, Life is life, father. There is no difference between nobles and commoners when it comes to life and death. Many people have been cured and regained their health, so why should I be afraid? The king was still worried and said, But this was reckless? What if something terrible happened to you? Hyang fell silent for a moment before responding, Father, you know how many lives have been lost to smallpox. This disease will eventually reach the palace one day. If I can prove that this treatment works, we won't just be able to protect the people. We can also safeguard our own royal family. Don't you agree, Father? King Sejong was silent for a long time, deep in thought. I truly don't know if this child will be a blessing or a disaster for this nation. His actions resemble those of a wise philosopher, yet at times he strikes like an unpredictable storm, the king pondered. Finally, the king let out a sigh and gave his orders. Take this man to prison. Make sure he is well fed and not tortured. He then turned to the cattle herder and said, If anything happens to the Crown Prince, your life will be the price. However, if your words prove to be true, you will receive a great reward. The cattle herder trembled in fear and responded, I understand, Your Majesty. Meanwhile, the inspector was speaking with an astronomer. Have you heard about the Crown Prince? He asked. The astronomer nodded. Yes, he claims to have recovered from smallpox after being treated by a lowly servant. The Crown Prince even injected cow pus into himself. The inspector was astonished. That sounds absurd. But if it's the Crown Prince, he must have his reasons. He has always been capable of creating things beyond anyone's imagination. Before he could continue, two men ran toward them in a panic. The Crown Prince! They shouted. The inspector was startled. What happened? The eunuch anxiously replied. It's serious. At the palace, the Crown Prince lay in bed, his body burning with a high fever. Even so, Hyang insisted, I'm fine. But the servants looked at him with concern. How can you say that? Your fever is burning like a furnace? You insolent fool! How dare you endanger the Crown Prince and mock the royal family? Sodol, who had no idea what was going on, was confused and exclaimed, What's happening? The warden snapped at him. You still dare to play dumb? The Crown Prince is bedridden, his body burning with a fever so high, it's as if he's on the brink of death. The palace servants were in a panic. Meanwhile, inside the prison, Sodol, the man deemed responsible for the Crown Prince's condition, heard the news. He remained calm and said, Ah, you must be talking about the fever. The prison warden was taken aback. How do you know that? Sodol explained that this was a normal reaction. The fever will last for 5 days, but after 10 days the Crown Prince will make a full recovery. At first, the warden was skeptical, but just as Sodol predicted, 10 days later, Crown Prince Hyang was completely healed. As if he had never been sick, he stood before the king with pride and declared, Look, father, I have conquered the threat of smallpox. The king gazed at him thoughtfully. Deep inside, he still wasn't fully convinced that this method was truly effective, based on just a single case. But Hyang was undeterred. He made a bold request. Allow me to go to a place where smallpox is spreading. I will prove it. The king immediately refused. No, I will not allow it. However, before anyone could say anything else, the inspector general suddenly spoke from behind. Your Majesty, we cannot let this matter go unresolved. This could very well be a mere coincidence. Isn't the Crown Prince essentially forcing people to undergo this treatment? Hyang paused for a moment before responding firmly. Inspector General, hasn't your own family been using the same method for decades? How can you call this a coincidence? Besides, we will ask for voluntary participation. There will be no coercion. He continued, Everything in this world evolves through experimentation and the courage to try. If we are too afraid of failure, what will become of this kingdom? At those strong words, the room fell silent. No one dared to argue. The Inspector General clicked his tongue in frustration, but eventually relented. Areas hit hardest by the smallpox outbreak were prioritized for treatment. At first, many people were afraid, but after witnessing the promising results, they began volunteering for the treatment. To ensure the effectiveness of this method, King Sejong ordered a population census to be conducted alongside the smallpox vaccinations. This strategy was like killing two birds with one stone. Vaccinations were administered while the census ensured accurate results. Once the effectiveness of the treatment was confirmed, the king finally gave permission to implement the vaccination across the entire Joseon kingdom. One day, as Hyang was walking through the palace, a familiar voice called out to him. Hyang, look at this. Do you know what this is? Hyang turned to see his older sister, Jungso, smiling while holding something in her hands. That's a sogo, a traditional drum, he replied. Jungso nodded. That's right, I'm going to give you a little performance as a gift. Even though she wasn't particularly skilled at playing instruments, Jungso still tried to entertain her younger brother. Hyang listened patiently, but eventually he couldn't take it any longer. Afterward, Jungso teased him. You can't just sit around studying all the time. You have to enjoy the arts too. Oh, have you gained weight recently? Just then, a servant arrived to escort Jungso away. Princess, it's time to go, they said. Jungso waved goodbye. See you later, Hyang. Hyang smiled as he watched his sister leave. Deep down, he felt relieved. At the very least, Jungso was healthy now. With the smallpox issue mostly resolved, Hyang shifted his focus to other policies. He began compiling medical records into a book that documented traditional Korean treatments and agricultural methods suited to Joseon's climate. Not only that, but Hyang also proposed policies in various other fields, including the creation of new maps to aid the kingdom's development. Seeing his accomplishments, Hyang smiled with satisfaction. These efforts laid the foundation for greater efficiency on a broader scale. Though some ministers occasionally voiced objections, Hyang often dismissed their protests outright. This earned him the nickname, the Six Ministries' Sleepless Road. The administrative center of Hanyang remained bustling day and night, reflecting the kingdom's tireless activity. Hyang's reputation as an unwavering leader spread far and wide. As the ruler of the kingdom, King Sejong often spent time in deep thought. One night, he gazed up at the starry sky, lost in contemplation. Without informing his guards, he decided to walk alone to his son's quarters. A servant, noticing his intent, attempted to stop him, but the king reassured him. I simply wish to speak with my son in private, he said. When he arrived outside Hyang's chamber, he noticed that the oil lamp was still lit, a sign that his son had yet to sleep. A court official stepped forward and reported, Your Majesty, the Crown Prince often stays up until 1 or even 3 in the morning. He really should sleep earlier. The king was taken aback. He's still so young, yet he works so hard. Inside the room, Hyang was writing when he heard the announcement of his father's arrival. He quickly put down his brush and greeted the king. Father, what brings you here so late at night? He asked respectfully. The king smiled. I was just taking a walk and saw your light was still on. What are you working on? Hyang answered honestly. I was reading a book, father. Curious, the king asked. A Western book? Like, what is it about? Hyang explained. It's called The Art of Alchemy. The king frowned in confusion. Alchemy? What is that? Hyang elaborated. It's the study of how to transform metals like iron or tin into gold using various methods. The king stroked his chin, deep in thought. Turning iron into gold? Is that even possible? Hyang sighed. Unfortunately, according to this book, it's not. However, alchemical experiments played a crucial role in the development of modern chemistry. Hearing this, King Sejong's curiosity grew. Let me see the book, Hyang nodded. Of course, father. I even have a translated version if you'd like to read it together. The king took the book and skimmed through the pages. I'm just curious about how Western writings look. Hours passed. Hyang started feeling drowsy, struggling to keep his eyes open, hoping his father would finish soon. However, the king remained completely engrossed, reading with intense focus. Hyang was amazed by his father's dedication. Father, aren't you tired? Why are you so focused? The king smiled. Western writing is quite fascinating. He then pointed at a line of text and said, Look at this. From the patterns I see, this appears to indicate the subject of a sentence. Notice how most sentences begin with the same letter. He then broke down the words into their initial, middle, and final syllables. Hyang listened in awe. In a short amount of time, his father had already recognized the spelling structures and patterns in Latin. Hyang remained silent for a long while, utterly stunned by his father's brilliance. This man, he's not just a king, he's a true genius, he thought. Seeing his son speechless, the king patted his shoulder and asked, Am I wrong? Hyang snapped out of his thoughts and quickly responded, No, father, you're absolutely right. The king then spoke. This makes me wonder, what do you think about creating a unique writing system for Joseon? Hyang was taken aback, but immediately replied, I've long believed that Joseon needs its own writing system. Even among those who know Chinese characters, very few are truly proficient. The king hesitated before saying, But if I announce my intention to create a new script, the Hall of Worthies will oppose me immediately. The Hall of Worthies, established by King Sejong, was a research and policy institution heavily influenced by Confucian thought. Hearing this, Hyang responded, However, there are many people who can't even write petitions because they don't know the characters. If you explain this properly, everything will go smoothly. The king smiled at his son's answer. It seems you've been struggling with writing all this time, haven't you? Hyang gave an awkward smile, though deep down, he truly found writing difficult. The king then recalled his own experience. I remember when I first tried to write. It was incredibly difficult. I spent 2 hours just composing a single poem. But when your grandfather saw it, he burst out laughing. Then the king stood up, walked toward the door, and said, It's been long enough. You should get some rest now. Hyang bowed and replied, Yes, father. You should rest as well. Joseon needs you to stay healthy. The king was pleased by his son's concern. With a fond smile, he said, This boy, I hope you turn 15 soon. Hyang was puzzled, unsure of what his father meant, but the king simply gave him a warm smile and said, Go to sleep. The next day, Hyang stood before the royal court and addressed the king. The 6 ministries should be completely separated, and each ministry must document its work in detail. If records are kept only in chronological order, future generations will waste valuable time searching for the information they need. The king turned to the court officials and asked if anyone had a different opinion. They answered in unison, We agree with the crown prince's proposal. After careful consideration, the king spoke. I also think this is a good idea. I understand why certain policies were implemented, but future generations will only grasp the reasoning behind them by looking at well-organized records. He continued, From now on, each minister must organize and classify records according to the crown prince's instructions. Everyone in the court listened attentively and responded in unison. We obey your majesty's command. Once the meeting was over, the officials dispersed. However, the Grand Inspector and the Chief Royal Historian walked together, looking displeased. The Chief Historian frowned. This is troubling. Now the Crown Prince is even restructuring how the 6 ministries record their work. That should be our responsibility. The Grand Inspector responded firmly. Aren't all official records already documented in state reports and the daily journals of the Royal Secretariat? Those records already detail the king's daily life and his interactions with the bureaucracy. The chief historian acknowledged this, but questioned whether duplicating records would only add unnecessary work. The Grand Inspector added, Even without these changes, we've been extremely busy lately, and it's all because of the Crown Prince's actions. If this continues one day, he might cause serious problems. To be honest, if things keep going this way, the atmosphere in the court could change drastically. There may even come a time when the Crown Prince ends up destroying everything he built himself. However, the chief historian disagreed. He believed that while the Crown Prince's reforms were radical, his intentions remained virtuous. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince was filled with excitement. This is true reform. I will completely change these disgusting old habits. Just thinking about it fills me with energy. I won't tolerate this bureaucratic nonsense any longer, he declared passionately. The Grand Inspector added, But every proposal the Crown Prince makes goes against tradition. What if, without realizing it, he revives the dark shadows of the past? Suddenly a voice interrupted. That will never happen. The 2 officials, who had spoken with such confidence moments ago, immediately lowered their heads. State Councilor Ryu Jung-hyun had arrived. With a firm expression, he declared, Many people read a few books and believe they are qualified to discuss state affairs, yet they know nothing about how the world truly works. If the Crown Prince oversteps his bounds and dismantles what we have built, no matter that he is the Crown Prince, I will not stand idly by. Meanwhile, at the royal palace, King Sejong convened the morning session. I can imagine returning from the Ming Empire must have been difficult, he said. Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty, a court official replied respectfully. The king then inquired about the status of Joseon's embassy. One official reported that after lengthy negotiations, the Ming Empire had approved the establishment of a Joseon embassy in Shandong province. Hearing this, King Sejong felt somewhat relieved. Good. Was there anything else of importance during your journey? He asked. One of the officials reported that many prominent merchants were eager to purchase paper from Joseon. Paper? The Crown Prince repeated, as if seeking confirmation. The official continued, Yes, Your Highness. Many traders want to buy our paper because its quality is far superior to that of Ming's. They've even requested that we bring more on our next visit. After a moment of thought, King Sejong considered increasing paper production at the royal factory. Very well, you may return to your place, he said firmly. However, just as the situation seemed to settle, Hyang suddenly spoke. Your Majesty, I have something to say. With just one sentence, cold sweat formed on the foreheads of the officials around him. They feared that the Crown Prince was about to propose another idea that would add to their workload. Inside the Grand Palace Hall, tension filled the air. King Sejong hesitated before finally asking, Must you speak now? Hyang, the Crown Prince, met his father's gaze with unwavering determination. Yes, father, he answered resolutely. Seeing his son's persistence, the king finally granted him permission. Very well, go ahead. With a calm yet confident voice, Hyang made his proposal. I propose that we abolish the paper factory. His words sent shockwaves through the room. The ministers and officials exchanged stunned glances, their jaws nearly hitting the floor. How could the Crown Prince suggest something so absurd? The paper factory had long been a major source of income for the kingdom. Ming citizens sought after their paper, and Joseon's high-quality paper was a valuable commodity. This decision contradicts everything the Crown Prince has advocated for. What could be the reason behind it? Some officials murmured, unable to believe what they had just heard. Hyang, hearing their whispers, furrowed his brows and spoke firmly. Silence, and listen to me. He looked directly at the ministers before continuing his explanation. As my father and all of you know, Joseon's paper is of exceptional quality thanks to the skill of our craftsmen. However, there is a serious issue we cannot ignore. He took a deep breath before continuing. These craftsmen are not being paid fairly. Their wages are so low that many struggle to support their families. Some are even forced to take on extra work or abandon their trade altogether to become farmers or laborers. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy. Some officials began to realize that something was deeply flawed within their system. However, not everyone was convinced. Ryu Jung-hyun, the influential state councilor, immediately responded. This is not an issue of a flawed system. It's an issue of laziness. Look at the military factories and other royal workshops. Their workers have low ranks, yet they continue to perform their duties diligently. He continued in a challenging tone. Those who choose to leave are simply people unwilling to put in the effort. If they truly wish to stay, they must work harder. Hyang shot Ryu Jung-hyun a sharp look. His fists clenched as he struggled to suppress his anger. Are you truly that blind? Hyang finally retorted. Officials like you receive numerous additional benefits. Even in your own residence, guests arrive at dawn, bringing gifts and paying their respects. Ryu Jung-hyun remained composed and replied, That is merely an expression of gratitude and goodwill. Hyang let out a faint smirk before replying. I am not saying it is wrong, but if we continue to neglect the well-being of our craftsmen, how can we expect them to remain dedicated? If this continues, it won't just hinder our technological advancements, it will lead to the complete disappearance of Joseon's paper-making art. His words echoed through the chamber. Some officials began to waver in their stance. King Sejong appeared deep in thought, realizing there was truth in his son's argument, but before he could make a decision. Crown Prince, do you realize that King Taejong established this paper factory to ensure the quality of our currency? If the factory is shut down, we will face the same issues as before. He looked at Hyang with unwavering conviction. I urge you to reconsider this decision. King Sejong glanced left and right, listening to the two opposing arguments. Doubt began to creep into his mind. As uncertainty clouded his judgment, Hyang met his gaze and gave him a subtle signal. Softly, Hyang murmured, Father, you know what must be done, don't you? I trust you. King Sejong looked at his son, then closed his eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep breath. A crucial decision had to be made. Suddenly, Hyang's expression changed. The determination in his eyes faded, leaving his face blank. He carefully observed his father. King Sejong, the dignified and wise ruler, turned back to him and asked, Do you think this is the right decision? Hyang fell silent for a moment. Since when did his father start asking such difficult questions? Was he expecting Hyang to be more involved in this discussion? Letting out a quiet sigh, the Crown Prince finally responded firmly, Have the ministers forgotten about the golden-tipped pen? The room fell into silence. Hyang continued, That document clearly outlined the court standards. The paper must be 3 choke wide, 2 choke tall, with a smooth surface and its color as bright as peach blossoms. We employ craftsmen to meet these standards, yet we pay them next to nothing. Ryu Jung-hyun hesitated, but after a brief pause he asked, Then what about the costs? Hyang gave a faint smile. Allow me to give you an example, he said confidently. If we recognize these craftsmen as royal merchants, their business will flourish. In turn, the court can collect taxes from their profits. This revenue would far exceed the initial costs we invest in them. The officials fell into deep thought, carefully digesting the Crown Prince's argument. Suddenly, a voice emerged from the center of the room. I believe the Crown Prince's proposal makes sense. All heads turned toward the speaker. It was none other than Kim Ji-um, the Minister of Taxation. He continued, For nearly 3 generations of the Joseon dynasty, this issue has remained unresolved. If we have a way to cut costs while increasing revenue, why not give it a try? However, before anyone could respond, General Sung spoke up in a loud, reprimanding tone. Minister of Taxation, mind your words. Have you forgotten that every person must follow the teachings of the sages to maintain peace in our nation? He then turned to King Sejong and said, Your Majesty, the Crown Prince's suggestion may bring short-term benefits. However, to achieve everlasting peace and prosperity, we must prioritize the moral education of the people above all else. Suddenly, another official interjected. Your Majesty, what the state councilor just said is nothing but empty theory. How can the people embrace the teachings of the sages when they are constantly struggling in poverty? Education is important, but we can only educate the people if they are well fed. His statement immediately ignited a heated debate. How could a high-ranking official say such a thing? Someone retorted. But the commotion came to an abrupt halt when King Sejong suddenly raised his hand. The room fell into complete silence, all eyes now fixed on him. Enough! The king's voice echoed throughout the hall. I have heard enough from all of you. He let out a deep sigh before continuing. Yes, moral education is important, but ensuring the people's livelihood is just as vital. I want all of you to find various solutions to address this matter. No one dared to oppose the king's command. The officials simply lowered their heads and responded in unison. We shall follow your majesty's orders. King Sejong then continued. As for the issue of the paper factory, I acknowledge that the Crown Prince's argument is valid. However, shutting it down abruptly may not be the right course of action. He scanned the faces of the officials before delivering his final command. Therefore, come up with a more comprehensive solution and report back to me. The room fell silent once more. No one dared to challenge the king's decision now. The fate of the paper factory, and perhaps even the future of the kingdom, depended on the solutions the officials would propose. In unison, the officials responded, "Your will is our command." After giving his final instructions, King Sejong turned toward the Crown Prince, the son he cherished deeply. "Crown Prince, listen carefully." Fiang immediately bowed with respect and replied, "Yes, father." The king continued, "I know you care deeply about the prosperity of the kingdom and the well-being of the people. As Crown Prince, that is your duty. For that reason, I will not reprimand you. Instead, I wish to commend you." Outwardly, Hyang showed gratitude, but deep down, he thought, "Wait, wasn't that just a scolding?" King Sejong went on, "But there is something you must keep in mind. Every time you speak, there are always those who oppose your ideas. This poses a challenge for the ministers, and even I often struggle to fully understand the reasoning behind your proposals. That is why I believe you need to articulate your political views more clearly when presenting your ideas." At the mention of political views, Ryu Junghyun's expression darkened. The king continued, "You will do this in the main hall, in front of all officials ranked 3 and above, including the ministers. Can you handle that?" Hyang, sensing a great opportunity before him, could barely contain his excitement. "So, you want me to deliver a full presentation?" he asked, seeking confirmation. The king nodded. With unwavering confidence, Hyang replied, "Yes, father. I only need 5 days to prepare." Once the meeting concluded and the officials exited the main hall, murmurs of conversation filled the air. "How can a child possibly have political views?" one official scoffed. "I don't understand what His Majesty is thinking either," another chimed in. "No matter how brilliant the Crown Prince is," one official said, shaking his head, "he is still just a child. Even with all the preparation in the world, convincing the ministers will not be easy." "I agree," another added. "Even if he spends 5 days preparing." Before he could finish, Ryu Junghyun suddenly cut in. "No, we must also prepare thoroughly." The group turned to him, sensing that Ryu Junghyun had something in mind. "Not just documents," he continued. "We need to familiarize ourselves with the national policies of other countries as well." One official hesitated. "But he's only 9 years old. Do we really need to go to such lengths?" Ryu Junghyun shot him a sharp look. "Have you already forgotten what that 9-year-old has done to us so far?" "It may be the Crown Prince who speaks," he went on, "but these ideas clearly reflect His Majesty's own thoughts. Up until now, has the king ever opposed the Crown Prince's proposals?" The officials exchanged glances. "No, that has never happened." Ryu Junghyun's voice was firm as he continued. "Yes, the Crown Prince is only 9 years old, but we must remember who stands behind him, His Majesty himself. We must prepare carefully. Never forget how we built Joseon. We cannot allow the mistakes of past kings to repeat themselves." Another official suddenly voiced his concern. "Are you suggesting that we censor his speech?" The chief censor, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke with a resolute tone. "Regardless, we must first issue an official reprimand. How can we allow a 9-year-old child to discuss matters of politics?" Amidst the murmurs of those scheming to bring Hyang down, one person silently recognized the prince's talent. "But from the golden pen incident, we saw that the Crown Prince truly has the ability." Before he could finish, the chief censor angrily cut him off. "That's exactly what frustrates me the most." The room fell silent once again. They all knew that no matter what happened, the 5th day would be the decisive moment. The chief censor let out a long sigh, his face filled with regret. "I should have opposed him from the start," he muttered. "When the Crown Prince proposed using gold-tipped pens for trade, I knew it would be the beginning of everything. Yet from that moment on, His Majesty and the ministers only cared about wealth. Clenching his fists, his eyes burned with determination. All I can do now is regret not being more resolute. We must file an official complaint against the Crown Prince immediately." The ministers exchanged glances before nodding in agreement. "Yes, we must act quickly." Without wasting any more time, the chief censor led a group of officials out of the chamber, their departure leaving behind a tense atmosphere. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the palace, a eunuch bowed respectfully before delivering his report to King Sejong. In short, most officials did not react positively to the Crown Prince's proposal. King Sejong let out a long sigh, clearly frustrated. Almost unconsciously, he tugged at his ear in irritation. Are they all so stubborn and conservative? However, there was something intriguing in the report. That said, the eunuch continued, many acknowledge the Crown Prince's intelligence and resolve. Even among those who oppose him, some have begun to recognize his talent. King Sejong fell into deep thought, his expression darkening. In a low voice, he murmured, "I don't have enough talented people around me." On the other side of the palace, Crown Prince Hyang sat in contemplation, reflecting on recent events. This kingdom lacks talented people. Those boomers are too stubborn, too tied to old traditions. Lost in thought, a nearby eunuch hesitantly asked, "Your Highness, what does boomers mean?" Hyang glanced at him briefly before replying nonchalantly, "It's nothing. I wasn't talking to you." Yet his mind continued to race. This isn't even the late years of the dynasty. It's still the early era of Joseon. The ruling class should still be flexible, shouldn't they? How can I convince those hard-headed ministers? More than that, there was something else bothering him. Father said he would gather all high-ranking officials, including those of rank 3 and above. They'll definitely look down on me just because I'm a child. Hyang clenched his fists. Then, as if an idea had struck him, his eyes sparkled. All right then, I'll give them a small glimpse of the 21st century, capitalism, and modern administrative structures. Without wasting another second, he stood up. Eunuch, I need to prepare something. Take me to the Royal Art Bureau and the Armory. The eunuch was startled but quickly bowed deeply and replied, As you command, Your Highness. Deep inside, he couldn't help but wonder, what kind of trouble is the Crown Prince going to cause this time? 5 days later, the main hall of Gyeongbokgung Palace was bustling with activity as high-ranking ministers and officials gathered in full force. Among them, casual conversations filled the air. Minister Cha, it's been a while. Minister Cha smiled warmly. Minister Park, how long has it been? When did you return to the capital? I just arrived yesterday, Park replied. However, their light-hearted chatter quickly shifted to a more pressing topic. So, His Majesty summoned us to hear the Crown Prince's political views, one official asked skeptically. Isn't this absurd? Making us come all the way here just for that? Another grumbled. Yes, what a waste of time, someone else muttered, shaking his head. Why should we even bother listening to this? Many officials nodded in agreement. It was clear they saw this as nothing more than an unnecessary formality. But before their murmurs of dissatisfaction could spread further, a loud announcement echoed throughout the hall. His Majesty the King has arrived. Instantly, silence fell over the room. All the officials bowed their heads as King Sejong entered and took his seat on the throne, radiating undeniable authority. Without wasting time, the king got straight to the point. As you all know, the Crown Prince has recently proposed several policies, he said firmly. However, I believe we cannot fully evaluate these proposals without understanding the foundation of his thinking. His gaze swept across the officials, who were now listening attentively. That is why I have gathered you all here, to hear the Crown Prince's political views firsthand. A tense silence filled the hall. Officials exchanged glances. Some remained skeptical, while others grew curious. But one thing was certain. Today, they would witness something unprecedented in Joseon's history. King Sejong's eyes sharpened as he addressed his ministers. I expect all of you to listen carefully and guide him so that he does not stray from the right path. In unison, the ministers responded, Yes, Your Majesty. From the distance, the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. All heads turned toward the source. Crown Prince Hyang strode forward with unwavering confidence, followed by attendants carrying several mysterious objects. The sight made the ministers exchange puzzled looks. What is that? Someone whispered. Hyang stopped before his father and bowed respectfully. I am grateful to Father for granting me this opportunity, he said with a steady voice. Now, I will present my political views. King Sejong nodded. Proceed! With permission granted, Hyang clapped his hands, and immediately the attendants unfurled a massive scroll containing a reform petition for the Joseon kingdom. Then Hyang picked up a strange object, something no one had ever seen before, a megaphone. Can everyone hear me clearly? His voice boomed throughout the hall, and ministers and officials glanced at each other, stunned. What is this? One of them whispered in confusion. Why is the Crown Prince's voice so loud? What kind of device is he using? But Hyang remained unfazed. Thanks to the opportunity given by my father, I am now able to address all of you, esteemed ministers. So, without further delay, let us begin. The room fell into silence. Whether out of curiosity or skepticism, everyone was now paying close attention. With confidence, Yang began explaining his vision. Using various illustrations and diagrams as supporting evidence, he presented his ideas with clarity. The foundation of my political philosophy is to achieve the best possible outcome for all of humanity, he declared firmly. As you know, this was also the ideology behind the founding of the Joseon dynasty. This aligns with the fundamental principles of a wise ruler, to prioritize the people and ensure their well-being. Some ministers began nodding slightly while others remained silent, waiting for what came next. However, there is a major issue in our land, Hyang continued. Our country has very little flat land. The steep, rugged mountains force people to crowd into limited areas. With so little farmland, poverty will only continue to rise. That is why we must promote not only agriculture, but also craftsmanship and trade. By doing so, the nation can prosper, and we can acquire what we lack from other countries. Some officials looked stunned, while others began to chuckle. The Crown Prince wants to rely on trade, one minister whispered, snickering. Too idealistic, another scoffed. However, most remained silent, watching with growing curiosity. Hyang stayed composed. He drew a new diagram and continued his presentation. Therefore, we must reform our 6 ministries and restructure the local government system. Several officials widened their eyes. But that doesn't mean we should discard all of our good traditions. The system we've used until now must be adapted to the times. Suddenly, the room fell silent. Now, everyone was truly paying attention. First, we must abolish the current 6-ministry system and replace it with 3 main branches, legislative, executive, and judiciary. Each branch will have specialized roles to ensure a balance of power. An older minister looked visibly shocked. Second, we need to reform the local government structure. Right now, too much responsibility is placed on a single person. Officials should divide their duties among themselves to improve efficiency. Some officials began whispering among themselves. Third, we must establish an education system that allows people to escape poverty. Basic education should be available to everyone, equipping them with the necessary knowledge to survive and prosper. A few officials' eyes widened in disbelief. Fourth, we must exploit our gold and silver mines, implement a fair taxation system, and reform land policies so that they don't exclusively benefit the nobility. When Hyang finished speaking, the room remained silent, not out of rejection, but out of sheer astonishment. Some ministers looked genuinely enlightened. This is far more revolutionary than I imagined, one official murmured. Just as I suspected, the Crown Prince is a mad genius. A heated debate broke out in the hall. Many of them were beginning to realize something. This wasn't just empty rhetoric. This was a blueprint for the kingdom's future. Meanwhile, Hyang simply smirked. This is just the beginning. The gathered ministers stared at him in shock, their expressions a mix of awe and confusion. Seeing their reactions, Hyang couldn't help but feel amused. If you're surprised now, it's still too early, he thought. There's still a long road ahead before I can truly reclaim my lost sense of joy. In the grand hall, Crown Prince Hyang stood tall after delivering his speech. Then, he concluded his presentation with a final statement. And that is my political vision. The entire room fell into silence, each person struggling to process what they had just heard. After Hyang finished presenting his political views, the entire room fell silent. The elderly officials standing around him could not hide their astonishment. A 9-year-old child stood before them, speaking with unwavering confidence. Even Ryu Jung-hyun, one of the most conservative ministers, had to admit that this child was truly exceptional, simply remarkable, he thought. King Sejong finally spoke. Did you come up with all of this on your own? Hyang shook his head and answered honestly. No, father. I referred to the works of great scholars, and I have also read some books from the West. King Sejong gazed at his son in silence before asking, Books from the West? Hyang nodded. He could sense a slight tension in the room. You've brought up many points that I had never even considered, the king continued. Even though many institutions and customs have changed since our kingdom was founded, it appears that several outdated systems are still in place. The Crown Prince bowed his head respectfully. You flatter me, father. Then, in a calmer tone, he added, There is a Western saying, new wine must be put into new bottles. The room fell silent once more. He continued, It has been 30 years since King Taejong established the Joseon dynasty, yet the suffering of the people remains unchanged. That is why I believe reform is necessary for the future of everyone. Several officials flinched at his final words. At that moment, Hyang lifted his head and looked directly at them with confidence. He declared once more, Yes, for the future of everyone. Bowing deeply to his father, Hyang formally concluded his presentation. As the Crown Prince left the main hall, the officials remained silent. Not a single whisper was heard, only a tense, heavy silence. However, that silence was soon broken when someone finally spoke. What do you think? Minister Ryu Jung-hyun let out a heavy sigh, his expression full of discontent. What is wrong with me? My mind feels completely frozen, he murmured to himself, clenching his fists. We must submit a petition to stop him immediately. The Crown Prince hides behind grand words like, for the future of everyone. But in doing so, he disregards our values and traditions. Not only that, but he is also following legalist principles instead of Confucianism. I can only lament this. Indeed, how can the Crown Prince have such reckless ideas? Another official interjected. A similar reaction spread through the Office of Censors. We must submit a petition to prevent this. Yes, absolutely. Amidst the rising commotion, Sung-um stood up and spoke loudly. I will be the first to oppose the Crown Prince's ideas. His face was firm as he continued. On the surface, the Crown Prince's words seem logical, but in reality, he is trying to revive the tyranny of Qin Shi Huang. We must stop him. The discussion grew more heated. However, someone suddenly spoke in a lower tone. His Majesty seems very fond of the Crown Prince. At once, the atmosphere grew heavier. Even so, we cannot allow this dynasty to collapse, can we? At that moment, Sung-um, one of the more influential ministers, lowered his head slightly, his expression filled with worry. Then, in a quiet yet sharp voice, he said, If the worst comes to pass, we will have no choice but to remove the Crown Prince. A man beside him gasped, his eyes widening. Isn't that too extreme? Sung-um looked at him coldly. After hearing the Crown Prince's presentation, you still think this isn't serious? Even the current king was not originally the Crown Prince. Someone quickly covered his mouth before he could finish his sentence. Hey, watch your words! Another person beside him whispered urgently. Do you think your neck is made of iron? Silence fell over the room once more. The once heated discussion had turned into an eerie stillness. No one spoke, yet in their hearts one thing was becoming clear. Today marks the beginning of something big. Sung-um angrily brushed away the hand that reached for him and shouted, Am I wrong? How could a 9-year-old child utter such nonsense? His gaze was sharp, his voice filled with fury. We must hold the Crown Prince's tutors accountable, and even His Majesty himself. Discipline has always been the most important thing. If everyone simply praises him without restraint, the consequences will be disastrous. Someone hurriedly interjected. What you should be saying is that We need to enforce stricter discipline on the Crown Prince. But speaking of overthrowing him. However, before the man could finish his sentence, Sung snapped, "Look at the situation we are facing now. Do you think it's not too late? We must remove him immediately. Only then can we restore the path of a true king." Hearing these words, many officials began to feel uneasy. "You're speaking too loudly," someone whispered, worried about prying ears. On the other hand, some ministers supported the Crown Prince's views. They spoke amongst themselves with excitement. "It's been a long time since I've felt such relief," one of them said. "At last, we're hearing something that makes sense. I agree, usually we have to listen to endless nonsense. But now, we've heard practical suggestions for what Joseon truly needs. It feels like my ears have been cleansed." Another official added, "My mind feels enlightened now." And did you see His Majesty's expression earlier? He looked like he wanted to implement those policies immediately. I never imagined the Crown Prince would be this extraordinary. With him, the Joseon kingdom will... Before he could finish his sentence, a group from the opposing faction suddenly approached them. The royal ministers were now divided. Two factions stood face to face, one supporting the Crown Prince, the other opposing him. As they crossed paths, tensions escalated. Those against the Crown Prince saw his supporters as big-mouthed hypocrites. Meanwhile, his supporters retaliated by calling them power-hungry hypocrites. "How shameful," someone shouted. That remark only fueled the anger between the two sides. "Let's go! Wasting our time with these hypocrites is pointless. We need to draft a petition. That's the only solution." On the other side, someone smirked and replied, "Do you think we don't know how to write a petition? We should submit one too." The atmosphere grew more heated as both sides prepared to take action. Meanwhile, inside the palace, Hyang was conversing with his father, King Sejong. King Sejong looked at him with pride. "Your presentation today was truly remarkable. There are many policies I want to implement immediately. However, as I mentioned earlier, there are still aspects of your political views that I do not fully understand." The Crown Prince gave a small smile. "Father, you flatter me too much. Honestly, these policies will be difficult to implement under the current circumstances. That's why I believe that as father and son, we should discuss policies more often." King Sejong let out a sigh. "I am slightly concerned about the flood of petitions that will arrive tomorrow." Hyang smiled and said, "The chief secretary is going to have a hard time." King Sejong ended their conversation with a light-hearted remark. "I will send royal dishes to the Secretariat office tomorrow." The next morning, at the Secretariat office, two men stood frozen in place, stunned by the sight before them. Mountains of petitions stacked high on the office desks. One of them spoke. "What did I tell you? This was bound to happen. Did they stay up all night?" His companion replied, "Their stamina is incredible. Just looking at it is terrifying." However, before they could say anything more, another man quickly interrupted. "Standing around won't lighten the workload. Hurry up and sort through all of this." Without wasting time, everyone began working. A man who appeared to be a supervisor said, "As you all know, some of these petitions criticize His Highness the Crown Prince, while others support him. So, we will divide them into two categories." Another man responded, "Understood." That morning in the main hall, King Sejong sat on his throne, his expression grim as he gazed at the towering stack of scrolls before him. His sigh was heavy. "So many protests this time. It seems my ministers have been quite diligent," he remarked sarcastically, casting a glance at them. Feeling the sting of his words, the chief state counselor shot a sharp look at the king, but the others could only bow their heads in silence. Slowly he reached for a scroll at random, his eyes scanning each word carefully. But as he delved deeper into its contents, his expression shifted drastically. His jaw clenched, his fists tightened, and his eyes burned with barely contained fury. Without hesitation, he turned and called out loudly, "Head eunuch!" A man stepped forward respectfully, his voice calm as he responded, "Your Majesty." King Sejong fixed him with a piercing gaze and issued a firm command. "Summon the Crown Prince." Moments later, the doors of the council chambers swung open. The Crown Prince strode in with an air of composure, bowing deeply before his father. "Father, you called for me?" he asked. King Sejong nodded slowly. "Yes, I did. You may stand." As the Crown Prince straightened, the king picked up a scroll, his expression serious. "I called you here because it seems many officials have misunderstood what you said yesterday," he stated. Suddenly his voice rose, echoing throughout the hall. "Chief State Counselor." An elderly official standing among the ministers immediately stepped forward, his face slightly pale, but he answered with the utmost respect. "Yes, Your Majesty." King Sejong's gaze grew sharper. He raised the scroll in his hand and spoke firmly. "This is your petition. Read it aloud so the Crown Prince may hear it directly." The entire hall tensed. The officials exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that this situation was about to escalate. Chief State Counselor Ryu Jung-hyun hesitated. "Your Majesty, But King Sejong left him no choice. With a decisive motion, he extended the scroll toward him. "Take it. The Crown Prince must hear it directly from you to prevent any misunderstandings." There was no way out. With slightly trembling hands, Ryu Jung-hyun accepted the scroll. He took a deep breath before finally beginning to read. I, Chief State Counselor Ryu Jung-hyun, respectfully submit this petition to your majesty. King Sejong swiftly interrupted, his tone sharp. Skip the formalities and get to the point. Ryu Jung-hyun stiffened. His face turned pale, but he dared not defy the king's command. With a slightly unsteady voice, he continued. The Crown Prince's political views, though seemingly reasonable, contain many inappropriate elements. The tension in the room thickened. First, our kingdom upholds Neo-Confucianism, yet the Crown Prince's proposals lean more toward the academic path of legalism. Some officials began murmuring among themselves. The principles of legalism are too rigid and could lead to suffering among the people, Ryu Jung-hyun went on. His voice steadied now. He cast a quick glance at King Sejong before proceeding more cautiously. Second, the Crown Prince has proposed lifting restrictions on children born of concubines. The murmurs grew louder. Some officials straightened their backs, visibly startled by what they had just heard. This rule was established by King Taejong to maintain order within the royal court. Abolishing it recklessly would be an act of great disrespect toward the legitimate heirs. His tone grew firmer, as if trying to solidify his argument. Furthermore, if children of concubines are allowed to hold government positions, history has shown that they may use their influence for personal gain. The murmurs turned into uneasy whispers. The officials exchanged glances, trying to grasp the weight of those words. On the other side of the room, the Crown Prince stood tall. His eyes did not waver as he absorbed every word with unwavering focus. And on his throne, King Sejong remained silent, his expression unreadable. However, his clenched fist resting on the armrest hinted that a storm might soon erupt. Third, the Crown Prince suggests increasing the number of government officials. However, the more officials we have, the heavier the tax burden on the people. Several officials nodded in agreement. In my opinion, if local officials feel overwhelmed by their workload, they should simply seek assistance from local scholars instead of increasing bureaucratic redundancy. Having finished reading, Chief State Counselor Ryu Jung-hyun looked up and firmly stated, "These 3 points prove that the Crown Prince's political views are irrational." The Crown Prince listened attentively, his brows furrowed slightly, his expression calm, yet his eyes betrayed deep contemplation. Ryu Jung-hyun lowered his head, awaiting a response. However, the tension in the room thickened as Ryu Jung-hyun, one of the oldest advisors in the court, clenched his fists in anger. The Crown Prince's gaze now fell upon him. "Father, may I respond?" the Crown Prince asked. His voice was steady, but filled with conviction. King Sejong regarded his son in silence before finally nodding. The Crown Prince stepped forward, standing tall in the center of the hall. The 2 rows of officials seated on either side remained silent. Sensing the growing intensity of the moment, unwavering, Hyang began to speak. First, Chief State Counselor Ryu Jung-hyun claims that Neo-Confucianism is the guiding philosophy of our kingdom. His eyes swept the room, ensuring his words were heard clearly. But is that truly the case? The room fell silent. If we truly understand the teachings of the sages, the true philosophy of this kingdom is the path of the king, with the people as its foundation. Neo-Confucianism is merely a tool we use to achieve that goal. If we limit ourselves to a single tool, are we not restricting our own progress? Some officials stiffened, while others exchanged wary glances. Hyang continued. Think of the royal path as a plate, and philosophies and systems of governance as chopsticks and spoons. His tone was sharp, yet composed. Must we truly choose only one tool when we can utilize them all? A minister trembled, seemingly wanting to interject, but the Crown Prince gave him no opportunity. Neo-Confucianism is merely one branch of Confucianism. Are we so narrow-minded as to fixate on only one school of thought? His words were so compelling that, despite his mounting anger, Ryu Jung-hyun could do nothing but grit his teeth in frustration. The Crown Prince pressed on. Second, you claim that children born to concubines will abuse their power. He paused briefly, allowing his words to sink in, before continuing in a sharper tone. But are they the only ones guilty of corruption? The room buzzed with hushed murmurs. Look at history. People from noble families, whether born legitimate or illegitimate, have all engaged in corruption. Is it not unfair to single out children of concubines? Ryu Jung-hyun could no longer contain himself. He shouted, "Your Majesty!" But the Crown Prince did not stop. Is it not true that the law clearly states that anyone who takes a concubine is also responsible for their offspring's actions? The room grew even heavier with tension. The silence was so profound that even the sound of breathing was audible. Officials exchanged uneasy glances, their faces taut under the Crown Prince's piercing gaze. But he was not finished yet. Most of you have concubines yourselves, do you not? His words struck like a blade. Some officials flinched, while others lowered their heads, avoiding eye contact. It has long been the custom of esteemed families to bury their own faults while continuing to discriminate against children of concubines. Why is this injustice still tolerated? No one dared to answer. Only a suffocating silence remained, growing heavier by the second. Many heads bowed, as if trying to conceal their guilt. And third, you say that local officials can simply request the assistance of local scholars if they are overwhelmed with work. The Crown Prince locked eyes with Chief State Counselor Ryu Jung-hyun, his gaze unwavering. Since I first sat beside my father and observed how he governs the nation, I have read countless reports of people dying from starvation. He took a deep breath. But not once, not a single time, have I ever heard of local scholars stepping in to help them. The entire hall fell into an even deeper silence. The Crown Prince let out a long sigh before continuing. Rather than offering aid, these so-called scholars took advantage of disasters, raising interest rates on loans to outrageous levels. His voice, once controlled, now carried a hint of restrained fury. And then, what happened? The people were forced to sell their lives, becoming refugees as their land was taken from them. His gaze turned sharp as a blade. The chief state counselor, Ryu Jung-hyun, flinched at the mention of his name, but the Crown Prince's piercing eyes remained fixed on him. Tell me, for the powerless commoners, who do they fear more? The wild tigers. He paused, letting the tension build. Or the government officials and local scholars who bleed them dry? Ryu Jung-hyun, one of the oldest and most influential advisors in the court, froze. His face turned pale, his head lowering in silence. I want to hear your answer, Chief Counselor. King Sejong's voice echoed through the hall, shattering the heavy silence. The restless officials grew even more rigid. All eyes turned to Ryu Jung-hyun, whose rigid stance trembled slightly. Beads of sweat rolled down his temples. His lips quivered, struggling to form words, but no sound came out. The Crown Prince remained unwavering. Why are you silent, Chief State Counselor Ryu Jung-hyun? Answer him. The king's command was sharp and absolute. Under unbearable pressure, Ryu Jung-hyun finally mumbled in a barely audible voice. It is the local scholars. The air in the hall grew colder. The officials, who had already been tense, now fidgeted uneasily. King Sejong let out a low scoff before reaching for the towering stack of petitions before him. These petitions are quite interesting. He tapped the scrolls lightly with his fingers before continuing. It seems that the petitions submitted by the others are strikingly similar to that of the chief counselors. His eyes scanned the court. They were sent by different people, yet the contents are almost identical. His voice carried a subtle mockery, yet it was as sharp as a blade. How utterly laughable. The officials held their breath, not daring to speak. Then the king picked up a yellow scroll from the pile and handed it to the Crown Prince. But this one is different. He leaned back slightly, his gaze unreadable. Read it aloud. The Crown Prince bowed respectfully. Yes, father. With steady hands, he unrolled the scroll and quickly scanned its contents. The entire court watched in suspense. The words written within could change everything. Suddenly his eyes widened, his brows furrowed, and his expression grew serious. Noticing this, King Sejong spoke in a calm yet knowing tone. What do you think? The Crown Prince took a deep breath before reading a portion of the petition aloud. If consumption is encouraged, our society will decline, worshipping wealth instead of virtue. That is why the wise rulers of the past divided the people into 4 traditional classes: scholars, farmers, artisans, and merchants. Closing the scroll, his expression turned razor sharp, his eyes gleaming with conviction. I believe the one who wrote this petition deserves severe punishment, father. Gasps rippled through the hall, sweat forming on the officials' brows. None of them had expected the Crown Prince himself to demand punishment. He looked straight at King Sejong and continued, his voice resolute. First of all, in all political writings and teachings of the sages, there is no mention of such a rigid class division. His tone grew sharper. Yet this person dared to lie, attempting to deceive the ruler with fabricated doctrines. Such a blatant act of disloyalty must be punished accordingly. Suddenly, General Sung-um stepped forward. His face was flushed red, and his voice rose in protest. Crown Prince, the one who wrote this petition did so out of concern for the nation. Sung-um took another step closer, his eyes burning with emotion. If you punish someone for offering honest advice just because you don't like it, you will alienate everyone. The Crown Prince swiftly turned to face him, his gaze razor sharp. Honest advice? Yang let out a cold chuckle. This is not honest advice. This is a deliberate attempt to sow division. This is a fabricated lie. The tension in the room escalated. Sung-um clenched his teeth and retorted. Since ancient times, the wise have warned that extravagance is a disease that will bring ruin to a nation. We must avoid it at all costs. How can you claim that wastefulness is better than frugality? The Crown Prince turned to fully face him, his eyes gleaming with intensity. Very well, let me explain it to you again. His voice rang out, clear and unwavering, ensuring that every word left a lasting imprint on those present. Did the sages ever teach that the nobility has the right to exploit the common people? Did they teach that lending grain at an interest rate of over 50% is acceptable? The Crown Prince took a step forward, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. Tell me, why are more and more people being forced to sell themselves into slavery? Why are these exorbitant interest rates driving them to lose everything? He raised a hand and pointed directly at Sung-um. Are you saying that I should simply allow this to continue, just because it's tradition? Silence fell once again, but this time, it was not out of reverence, it was out of fear. Then, Hyang's voice rang out, breaking the oppressive tension. How dare you think that way? He stood tall, his expression burning with anger. And you call yourself a citizen of Joseon? The Crown Prince stood firm. His gaze was unwavering, and his posture showed no trace of hesitation. The royal court now felt like a battlefield, with Hyang standing at its center, a mere child, challenging the traditions upheld by those in power. Enough! The king's voice thundered as he slammed his hand against the table. The room fell into an instant hush. Officials held their breath as the crown prince flinched slightly before lowering his head. "I apologize, father. I overstepped my bounds." The king gave his son a stern warning. "Even if what you say is true, you must not speak so disrespectfully." Suppressing his emotions, the crown prince responded with deference. "Thank you for your mercy, father." The king then shifted his gaze and gave an order. "Chief censor, step forward." "Yes, your majesty," answered a man in blue robes. "Crown prince, hand him the scroll," the king instructed. Hyang extended the petition to the chief censor. The king continued. "There is a section that the crown prince has not read. Read it aloud." The chief censor received the scroll and unrolled it. But the moment his eyes landed on the text, his face went pale. His fingers clenched tightly around the paper. Without hesitation, he fell to his knees, his voice trembling. "Your Majesty, this is merely the opinion of one individual, not the entire censorate." The court held its breath. The king studied him intently before finally speaking. "I am aware of that. That is why the crown prince did not read that section, and neither will I." The chief censor lowered his head even further. "Thank you, your Majesty, for your mercy." The king let out a quiet sigh before concluding. "As for the punishment of the petition's author, I will deliberate on it carefully once this session is adjourned." As the court session ended and the officials began to disperse, a voice suddenly called out to the chief censor. Sung approached him, curiosity written all over his face. What was in that petition? However, the chief censor gave no response. He simply walked briskly ahead, ignoring the general's persistent questions. But moments later, the chief censor suddenly lunged forward, grabbing the collar of an elderly man. A loud shout echoed through the hall. "How dare you!" The chief censor was furious, his eyes ablaze with rage as he nearly launched himself at the old man. The surrounding officials quickly rushed in to restrain him. "Please, sir, calm yourself!" But the chief censor struggled violently, his voice rising even louder. "Move aside! This fool will be the death of us all." The elderly man, caught off guard, stammered in confusion. What do you mean, sir? What are you talking about?" The chief censor clenched his teeth. "You He jabbed a finger at the man he had seized. "Do you have any idea what you've done, suggesting the crown prince be overthrown?" His grip tightened, his gaze filled with pure contempt. Upon hearing his words, the surrounding officials froze in shock. Still gripping the old man's collar, the chief censor roared, "Who do you think you are to even speak of dethroning the crown prince?" The old man struggled to find his words, each syllable leaving his lips with difficulty. How can a crown prince who disregards the teachings of our ancestors and walks the path of betrayal still be worthy of his title?" The chief censor shot back. "And you think it's reasonable to overthrow a crown prince who is only 9 years old? Do you even hear yourself?" The old man stammered, "What does age have to do with following the wisdom of the sages?" The chief censor could no longer contain his fury. "You fool! If you wish to shift the course of power, you must wait for the right moment. You need strategic positioning, geographical advantage, and the support of the people. Those were the 3 factors that allowed His Majesty to ascend as crown prince. But right now, we have none of them." His voice grew sharper. "A reckless move will only lead to the deaths of every official in this court." A red-robed official stepped forward and spoke with unwavering resolve. "As royal officials, it is our duty to speak the truth when we witness wrongdoing. Isn't it only natural to risk our heads when challenging a king?" The chief censor fell silent, realizing the unwavering conviction of his subordinate. The other officials stood frozen, their eyes locked on him. With a frustrated sigh, the chief censor released the old man's collar. "Who would have thought someone as foolish as you could become an official?" He let out a bitter chuckle before shaking his head. "At this rate, we'll all be following this idiot straight to the afterlife." And with that, the chief censor ended their argument. Meanwhile, at the Eastern Palace, Hyang looked visibly frustrated as he thought about today's court session. "Why does the chief minister keep opposing me? Why are they so stuck in the past? Why do they keep bringing up the same old issues?" he muttered softly. Hyang began pacing back and forth in the room. He paused, closed his eyes, and tried to calm himself down. From their point of view, it made sense for someone to oppose his ideas. If someone asked me to give up farming and focus on commerce instead, I'd probably react the same way. He took a deep breath, once again trying to center himself. Outside the room, the servants could feel his anger radiating. Do they think only they can write petitions? Do they think I'm not capable of writing one myself? His voice spilled out past the room. With burning determination, he grabbed a brush and started writing. Word by word, he carefully inscribed his thoughts. I'll show them the true meaning of humility," Hyang muttered as his brush continued gliding over the paper. No one knew how much time had passed until an official stood frozen at the doorway, stunned to see an attendant from the Eastern Palace holding a large stack of documents. Suspicious, the official asked, "What is all this?" The eunuch replied calmly, "These are petitions written by the crown prince himself." "All of them?" the official asked in disbelief. The eunuch nodded. The official looked at the towering stack of petitions in front of him and sighed in defeat. "So, I guess we're not going home today," he muttered. When the petitions were finally delivered to the palace, the king couldn't hold back his laughter. "Who would have thought that child would go and write this many petitions? He really is my son," he said proudly. He then turned to Ryu Jung-hyun and said, "Chief State Counselor, you should read them too." Ryu Jung-hyun didn't look too thrilled, but he had no choice but to follow the king's command. "Yes, Your Majesty," he replied reluctantly, slowly unrolling the first petition. His displeasure was written all over his face, but curiosity began to take hold. Around him, the court inspectors and palace censors held their breath, eager to hear what the crown prince had written. The king then gave an order to the head eunuch. "Deliver this to the Minister of Taxation," he commanded in a calm but firm tone. Once he received the document, the Minister of Taxation was instructed to read it aloud. Though briefly at a loss for words, he had no choice but to obey. Carefully, he unrolled the scroll and began reading. "I, the loyal subject of His Majesty the King, Crown Prince Hyang, hereby voice my concern. Some ministers have scolded and accused me of following the path of legalism, citing the fall of the Qin dynasty as an example. But the Qin didn't collapse because they followed legalism. The dynasty fell because Emperor Qin Shi Huang and his followers defied the heavenly order. They exploited and killed the innocent. So tell me, how could a dynasty like that not fall?" The room began to stir with murmurs, but the Minister of Taxation continued reading. "Even so, it was also legalism that made the Qin dynasty the dominant force during the Warring States period, and those teachings still serve as fundamental principles to this day. Why do you think that is? They say that a mighty tree doesn't fall in a storm because its roots run deep. Governing a nation is no different. For our newly established kingdom to grow into a mighty tree, I believe we must embrace a wide range of ideas and plant deep, expansive roots. Is Neo-Confucianism the only teaching one must learn in order to pursue the virtuous path laid out by the wise?" When the reading ended, silence fell over the court. The officials exchanged glances, unsure of what to say. The chief state counselor, who had disliked the crown prince from the beginning, could only hide his displeasure. "Isn't my son brilliant?" the king said with a chuckle. "This petition may be surprising, but there's a lot we can reflect on. That's why I want to hear your thoughts. Consider it carefully and give me a proper response." At His Majesty's command, the officials all bowed and answered in unison. A few days later, Crown Prince Hyang was walking alongside a palace eunuch. His mind was lost in thought. "Now that I've laid everything out, my heart feels lighter," he thought to himself. In the distance, a panicked voice rang out. "Minister, get up!" Hyang turned his head and saw a minister collapsed on the ground. His face was pale, and he couldn't even open his eyes. "I can't take this anymore," the minister whimpered helplessly. Another official pointed at a mountain of petitions stacked nearby. "Sir, now's not the time to be lying down. Look at all these petitions." The minister let out a miserable groan. "Just kill me. Just end it now," he muttered. Hyang, watching the scene unfold, could only sigh and think to himself. As expected, the opposing faction is still submitting petitions non-stop. If I want to gain the people's support, I need to make them understand the benefits of smallpox vaccination. Only when they believe in it can I introduce new policies. He let out a faint smile. "Just a little more. I just need to wait for the right moment." A few days later, during a court session, an official stepped forward with encouraging news. In the regions that had received smallpox vaccinations, the number of cases had drastically dropped. The entire room was stunned. Almost immediately, proposals to expand the vaccination program to other provinces were raised. King Sejong nodded slowly, his eyes gleaming with interest. "Excellent," he said. "In that case, let's expand the smallpox vaccinations to other provinces." One of the royal advisors spoke up, his voice cautious. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, I believe it's still too early to expand the vaccinations based on only a few cases. Furthermore, this inoculation method uses cowpox, which many find revolting. I suggest we observe the effects for a longer period before making such a major decision." King Sejong listened carefully, then gave a slight nod. "Very well. We'll wait a while longer." A few days later, King Sejong addressed the entire royal court. "Most of the people in Gyeonggi province have now received the vaccination. While there have been a few side effects, neighboring provinces are already submitting petitions, pleading for the program to be extended to their regions. For the safety of the people, I wish to expand the vaccinations." "What are your thoughts?" the king asked. The chief state counselor quickly shook his head. "Your Majesty, we must not act hastily. The current state of the national treasury cannot support a wider rollout. I strongly urge Your Majesty to reconsider and delay the expansion." Another minister stepped forward and reported, "Your Majesty, there are reports that wealthy families in some regions, after learning of the vaccine's effectiveness, have voluntarily donated their livestock for the cause. Additionally, we've received an increasing number of petitions requesting permission for vaccination." Hearing this, the king let out a deep sigh. "In that case, we can't afford to delay any longer. Ministers, begin preparations to expand the vaccination nationwide." But once again, the chief state counselor stood up, firmly opposing the idea. "My deepest apologies, Your Majesty, but for many reasons I must say that a nationwide expansion is simply not feasible." The king's brow furrowed, displeasure clearly showing on his face. "Explain your reasons in full." Counselor Ryu Jung-hyun sighed and replied, "Winter is approaching, Your Majesty. Managing the budget will become even more difficult in the coming season." The king's eyes narrowed, his tone sharpening. Finances? Can't we raise funds from the wealthy families who are already willing to donate their cattle? Many commoners are even offering financial support to make this vaccination possible. So, tell me, what is the real issue? Still, Ryu Junghyun stood his ground. Your Majesty, if we start pressuring scholars and officials to donate, there will be fierce backlash. And besides, the vaccine's effectiveness hasn't been fully proven. How can we inject this disgusting cowpox pus into our citizens' bodies without certainty? Moreover, the people performing the vaccinations are mere cattle herders, not trained physicians. King Sejong's hands trembled with rage. Veins bulged at his temples as his entire body shook. He roared, "Ryu Junghyun, you contemptible wretch! Shut your cursed mouth right now!" The counselor flinched, his face drained of color. The king pointed a shaking finger at him. The entire court fell silent. The ministers held their breath, some sighing quietly as if they had expected this moment. King Sejong grabbed the scroll in front of him and raised it high. "Do you know what this is? This is the report on smallpox vaccinations in Hanyang. You keep saying this vaccine is disgusting and ineffective, but among all of you standing here today, not one of you is unvaccinated. Every single one of you, your families included, have already received it. And yet, you still dare to claim it doesn't work and resist expanding it to the rest of the nation." The atmosphere grew heavier. King Sejong swept his gaze across the court. All the officials had their heads lowered, trembling in fear. "You're all cowards, hypocrites, two-faced liars," he thundered. The ministers immediately dropped to their knees, their foreheads hitting the floor repeatedly. "Your Majesty, we have sinned. We deserve death," they cried in desperation. But King Sejong showed no mercy. His voice echoed fiercely through the grand hall. "I don't want to see any of your faces again. Get out of my sight, now!" The ministers remained prostrated, still begging for forgiveness. Suddenly, the king stood and growled in frustration. "Fine. I'll leave instead. I'll handle this myself. So, you bastards, and keep your mouths shut." With swift, angry steps, he stormed out of the royal court. "What were you thinking?" One of the ministers snapped at Ryu Junghyun. "Don't you know when to speak and when to stay silent?" But Ryu Junghyun was lost in thought. His eyes were blank. He didn't respond. He knew no words could fix what had just happened. The other ministers began murmuring among themselves, worry etched on their faces. "What do we do now?" someone whispered. "All we can do is perform a repentance ritual and find a way to expand the vaccination," another answered in despair. Heavy with emotion, they slowly left the court, one by one. The winter sky was a dull gray, and the cold wind cut through their bones. One minister muttered softly, "In the middle of winter, and now we have to perform a repentance ritual. What miserable luck we have." As they exited the silent, chilling hall, Ryu Junghyun remained where he stood, frozen. His empty gaze stared into the marble floor, lost in a whirlpool of dread and regret. He remained still for a moment before letting out a long, heavy sigh, as if bearing the weight of history itself. "I've lived too long," he murmured, his voice nearly swallowed by the silence. "If this continues, history will only repeat itself. A new tyrant, but the same destruction." His fist clenched, his face twisted in bitterness as he finally stepped out of the court. The wind was biting, but in his eyes, a fire began to burn. "Even if it costs me my life, I have to stop him." Meanwhile, in another wing of the palace, Hyang calmly listened to a eunuch's report. "So that's what father did," he said, voice cold and flat. His eyes narrowed, deep in thought. The eunuch hesitated before continuing. After that, His Majesty went to see the queen. But instead of looking serious, he glanced at the eunuch beside him, eyes twinkling with mischief. "Since things have turned out like this, should we just throw everyone into chaos?" The eunuch froze, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Forgive me, Your Majesty." Hyang chuckled softly. "Don't worry, psychological warfare won't do much good right now. They've already begun their repentance rituals. Let them drown in their own anxiety." Outside, in the biting cold, the Minister of Taxation was kneeling on a ritual mat, grumbling under his breath. "My knees are already killing me, and now I have to do a repentance ritual in this freezing weather." Suddenly, a royal messenger came running toward him in a panic. "Minister, urgent news!" The minister looked up, alarmed. "What's going on? Why are you so worked up?" The messenger took a deep breath and blurted, "The chief state counselor. He's writing a petition criticizing His Majesty's actions." The Minister of Taxation felt like he'd been struck by lightning. "What did you say?" His face turned pale. After a moment of stunned silence, he bolted toward the chief counselor's residence. One question echoed in his mind. Has that old man finally lost his mind? When he arrived, he didn't even wait. He tried to barge straight in. "We have to stop him." The commotion outside drew Ryu Junghyun's attention. He turned sharply toward the noise. But before he could speak, the minister burst in, his voice filled with disbelief and outrage. "Chief Counselor, what do you think you're doing?" he shouted. "Is our repentance not enough for you? Have you gone mad?" But Ryu Junghyun stood his ground. Calmly, he set down his writing brush and met the minister's eyes with a steady gaze. "I must deliver this warning. This issue must be addressed fully and clearly," he said, voice low but unwavering. "If you truly care about Joseon's future, then you'll understand." The Minister of Taxation stared at him in disbelief. "Chief Counselor, have you really lost your senses?" Ryu Jung-hyun ignored him. With boldness, he shoved the minister aside. "Out of my way. His Majesty has forgotten what it means to govern a nation, forgotten why ministers exist in the first place." With unwavering resolve, he grabbed the scroll containing his petition and strode out, fury burning in his chest. The Minister of Taxation stood frozen, then snapped out of it and chased after him in a panic. He looked at the other officials who were merely watching in silence. "Why aren't you stopping him? Do you want blood to be spilled?" One of them answered calmly, "I won't stop him because I understand his reason. If someone wants to be a scholar of integrity, they must stand firm in their convictions." Not long after, Ryu Jung-hyun's petition reached the king. "I, Ryu Jung-hyun, Chief State Counselor, bow my head to the ground and humbly present this grievance to your Majesty. The administration of a nation, as its name implies, is the act of governing. Thus, national policy must never be decided on a whim. Above all, the cornerstone of politics is consistency in decision-making. Without consistency, how can the people place their trust in their government? And yet, your Majesty's stance on the cowpox vaccination has strayed from that consistency. When we first discussed this matter, the plan was to first apply the vaccination in Hanyang to test its effectiveness, before considering a national rollout. This too was agreed upon by your Majesty. However, simply because a few voices requested broader access, you reversed your decision. How can such a reversal be called consistent? Furthermore, the matters of governance should always be carried out with mutual agreement between the king and his officials. Why does a king need advisors when making and implementing policies? Because it is impossible for a king to see and understand everything on his own. That is why he must consult with his ministers and listen carefully to their counsel. If a king decides and enforces all national matters on his own, what is the point of having a royal court? That would be no different from a dictatorship. And that is not the way of a true king. If a tyrant were to rise to the throne and push forward his political interests under the guise of urgency, what future would remain for Joseon? To prevent that, the agreement between the king and his ministers must be upheld at all costs. As your subject, I humbly ask your Majesty to reconsider, at the very least, for the sake of Joseon's future. In conclusion, I believe that the nationwide rollout of the cowpox vaccination, carried out for political purposes, must be stopped. This is because I truly believe that the vaccine has shown no proven results. And if one day it proves to be effective, I, Ryu Jung-hyun, will gladly offer up all of my property as compensation. No one dared to lift their head, let alone speak, until finally the king's voice shattered the silence. "Have you read all of it?" "Yes, your Majesty," the chief eunuch answered, trembling with fear. The king's piercing eyes swept across the room, scanning each bowed head. His voice dropped an octave, deeper, colder, more dangerous. "When I first heard of the benefits of cowpox vaccination, I did consider implementing it nationwide, but I didn't. Why? Because the right state counselor told me it was too reckless. I found that reasonable, and I accepted it. Now, let me ask you ministers, when have I ever used political power for selfish gain?" King Sejong's face darkened, barely holding back his anger. The ministers sat frozen, barely daring to breathe. If a king merely waits for his ministers to reach a consensus, losing the moment to act, then isn't he nothing more than a coward, a useless figurehead? His fist slammed against the table. The sharp crack echoed through the room. "Do you really not understand what I use political authority for?" Cold sweat began to form on the ministers' foreheads. Some clenched their fists, struggling to contain the tension gripping their bodies. But the king's fury was far from over. "Let me ask you this. If an outbreak of smallpox spreads to an area that hasn't been vaccinated, then what will you do? Will you sit and wait for it to reach the vaccinated regions just to prove its effectiveness? How many lives will be lost for your so-called proof? Would you truly say it's acceptable for hundreds of people to die, become disabled, or bear scars for life, just because the results aren't conclusive yet? Is that really a price you're willing to pay?" At last, Ryu Jung-hyun broke his silence. "Your Majesty, we too understand the weight of this decision, but strengthening the government and upholding royal tradition must come first. Smallpox is not a new disease." "Enough!" King Sejong snapped. His face flushed red with fury, his jaw clenched tight, his eyes blazed with righteous fire. "You bastard! You dare claim to follow the teachings of wise men while sacrificing your own people?" Suddenly, the doors to the royal hall burst open. A messenger stumbled in, fell to his knees, and gasped for breath. He managed to speak through ragged breaths. "Your Majesty!" "Urgent news." King Sejong turned sharply. "What brings you here in such haste?" "Forgive me, Your Majesty, but there's been an outbreak of smallpox. It's spreading in the Yeongdeungpo district, Jumcheon province." It was as if lightning had struck the throne room. King Sejong fell silent, eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Even Ryu Jung-hyun stood frozen, his face pale as sweat dripped down his cheek. The confident words he had spoken earlier now hung in the air, empty, meaningless, and hollow. In an instant, the king regained his composure. With a firm voice, he issued his command: "Place Yeongdeungpo district under complete lockdown. No one is to enter or leave, except those delivering medical aid. Begin treatment immediately as ordered." "Yes, Your Majesty." The messenger quickly stepped back and exited the room. The king turned his gaze toward the Minister of Personnel. The next matter is medical response. Minister, how is the progress? The Minister of Personnel replied, We've dispatched royal physicians from the court clinic to Yeongdongpo district. The king gave a small nod. Make sure the patients receive proper treatment without delay. Understood, Your Majesty. With hurried steps and labored breath, a small pair of feet ran through the corridor. Father, it's your son, said Hyang. The king was slightly surprised to hear his son's voice. May I come in for a moment? Hyang asked. Come in, the king replied softly. Hyang stepped in quickly, his tone serious. I heard there's a smallpox outbreak in Gyeongcheon province. Shouldn't we send physicians there? We've just been discussing that, the king responded. Then why don't we send additional support from Hanyang to assist the doctors in Gyeongcheon, Hyang suggested. Before the king could answer, Ryu Jung-hyun immediately opposed. That would be too reckless. But Hyang didn't back down. The doctors will be busy treating the sick. They'll need assistance. But if we use unvaccinated locales from Gyeongcheon, we risk spreading the disease even further. That's why it makes more sense to send vaccinated workers from Hanyang. We can pay them properly. This way, the doctors won't be overwhelmed and we can prevent the disease from spreading. Still, Ryu Jung-hyun objected. We can't allow that. If people from Hanyang contract the disease and bring it back to the capital, who will be responsible for their safety? Hyang paused for a moment, his expression full of resolve. I have complete faith in the vaccine's effectiveness. If this outbreak doesn't prove it, then I will step down as Crown Prince. He made the bold declaration, placing a hand on his chest and looking his father straight in the eye. The king was taken aback by his son's words, but before he could respond, Hyang continued. That's how confident I am in the vaccine, and if the people hesitate to help, then send me instead. I'll lead the efforts to care for those suffering from smallpox. The room fell silent once more. After a long pause, the king let out a sigh and turned to his ministers. Minister of Personnel, issue a royal decree to the people of Hanyang and begin gathering volunteers. All the ministers bowed deeply. As you command, Your Majesty. Then King Sejong turned back to Hyang. And you, Crown Prince, listen carefully. No matter how desperate you are, you must never speak so recklessly. It is a betrayal of your duty. Hyang lowered his head. Your kindness is beyond measure, father. But in his heart, he knew he had won. I've secured my chance. Now, it's only a matter of time. The distinct sound of the royal arrival announcement echoed through the East Palace. Hyang, who had been playing in the courtyard, suddenly froze and rushed to greet his father. He bowed respectfully. Father, you're here? Yes, the king replied. How have you been? Thanks to you, I've been well, Hyang answered obediently. He then invited his father to sit and talk. King Sejong began. Hyang, have you heard the news from Gyeongseong? I haven't, father, Hyang replied. Upon hearing this, Hyang couldn't hide his excitement. His eyes widened and a bright smile appeared across his face. Just as I expected, he thought to himself. The king continued. To be honest, even I didn't expect the results to be this good. I'm very proud of you. You paid attention to a method long dismissed as mere herder's practice. Hyang bowed deeply, grateful for his father's praise. The king's recognition filled him with pride. This is my victory, he thought to himself. But the king's voice quickly snapped him out of his thoughts. My son? Yes, father? The king gripped his cup tightly, his face slightly tense as he spoke slowly. I'm planning to execute Ryu Jung-hyun. Hyang's eyes widened in shock. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. The king continued. I'm also considering removing those who sided with him. When I think about the present and future of Joseon, I believe this is something I must do. Tell me, do you think I'm going too far? The crown prince paused for a moment before answering. Father, I believe they should be punished as a warning to others. And given the current state of the Joseon court, this situation actually presents an opportunity. The king listened carefully. He knew his son's words always carried weight. Hyang continued. Unfortunately, the power of the ministers and scholars has always outweighed that of the king. That's why I think this purge could be a valuable chance to strengthen royal authority. The king took Hyang's words seriously. They made sense. But Hyang added, Still, I'm not sure execution is the right path. Ryu Jung-hyun has contributed greatly to the country over the years. With his vast experience, it's only natural he'd be skeptical of a method he's never encountered before. That's why I believe the most appropriate punishment is exile. A faint smile appeared on Hyang's face as he finished his thoughts. The king didn't respond immediately, but his silence spoke volumes. He quietly agreed. I understand. I'll give it some thought. On the day King Sejong announced Ryu Jung-hyun's exile, the ministers fell to their knees and pleaded, Your Majesty, please reconsider. He only wanted to ensure the effectiveness of the vaccine. Ryu Jung-hyun also bowed low, begging for forgiveness. But the king, consumed by anger, shouted, Silence! Even now you try to justify yourself. Several other ministers also bowed, pleading, Your Majesty, perhaps the chief advisor was wrong, but everything he did was out of loyalty to the nation. Please reconsider this decision. Their words only fueled King Sejong's fury. If you keep spouting nonsense like this, I'll consider all of you to be accomplices of a traitor. Stop testing my patience any further. Then Sung boldly raised his voice. Your Majesty, accusing someone innocent is unjust. In governing a nation, a king and his ministers must find mutual understanding. As the wise men have taught us, harmony between ruler and council is the foundation of a monarchy. King Sejong scoffed, his face red with rage as he pointed at the ministers still kneeling before him. You're all such hypocrites. Do you think I don't see through your true intentions? You speak of harmony between king and ministers, but all you really want is to turn me into a powerless puppet. At that moment, the pressure on Ryu Jung-hyun was overwhelming. The entire hall was thick with suffocating tension. With a pale face and sweat dripping down his brow, he slowly lifted his head. His voice trembled as he tried to defend himself. Your Majesty, I never intended... Suddenly, a sharp-eyed man wearing a traditional hat stepped forward from the crowd. With a loud, firm voice, he declared, I am Jinmu from the Royal Investigation Bureau, awaiting your command. The king fixed his gaze on him and said coldly, Jinmu, listen carefully. Imprison these hypocrites, the chief state counselor, the right state counselor, the inspector general, and the chief censor. As you command, your Majesty. Without hesitation, Jinmu moved into action. Ryu Jung-hyun, the inspector general, the right state counselor, and the chief censor were all arrested and thrown into prison. The officials witnessing the scene were left in stunned silence. Even as the four were dragged away, they continued to plead, Your Majesty, this goes against the teachings of the sages. We only wanted to ensure the safety of the people. But the king ignored their cries. And thus, the crisis brought about by the smallpox vaccination came to a dramatic close. The official from the censorate who dared to suggest the crown prince be dethroned was tried for high treason. A restraining collar was placed around his neck, and he was exiled 1,000 miles away to a remote village, a punishment for trying to lead the king astray with narrow-minded arguments. The families of the chief state counselor, right state counselor, inspector general, and chief censor were stripped of their noble titles, reduced to commoners. As for the traitors themselves, they were exiled 1,000 miles away, and 80% of their assets were confiscated. Such was the fate of those who failed to adapt to the rapid changes brought by the unexpected force known as Crown Prince Hyang. Hyang gave a faint smile. At the very least, they're still alive. Isn't that enough? This video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next part.